Hey, welcome everybody to SteeleWatching, the podcast for Remington Steele fans. I am Eric, and I still have not recovered from a rearrangement of my workspace. But give me another few months and it'll be done.
And I'm Sara, and I'm back, and this time it's personal.
Oh, no.
I don't know. I was trying to think of a catchphrase.
Well, we are back with season 2.
Season 3.
Yeah, season 3. Why do I have season 2 written down? Oh,
wow,
man.
This is starting out really well.
Oh, yes. Season 3, episode 13, Stronger Than Steele. I knew that looked wrong for some reason. I just could not figure out what it was. Anyway, so here we are, Stronger Than Steele. But do we have anything?
And we're not talking about Steele's deodorant.
Or
I just thought it might have been a good catchphrase.
Or anything else. Do we have any announcements or anything like that? I don't think we do.
I don't know. It kind of feels like we should. But
well, we did have somebody give us a one-time cash contribution through our PayPal. In keeping with our tradition and our humiliation, we don't mention names unless specifically granted permission, and we have not been. But you know who you are. We thank you very much for that contribution, and as a thank you, he is going to
It's the drugs. It's the drugs.
Yeah, I need some. This person will be able to watch a couple of our live recording sessions. We grant this to all of our supporters as a way of saying thank you. Our monthly supporters get it ongoing, and our one-time supporters will get it for a month. So anyway, thank you. There you are.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So let's get on with Stronger Than Steele. First aired January 15, 1985, written by Carrie Lenhart and John Sackmer. I don't think we've seen those names before. No. And directed by Stan Latham, another new name.
I was going to say, I don't recognize any of those names. So that's kind of interesting this late in the game to have two new writers and a director. Could be wrong about the director, but I'm fairly certain we haven't seen those writers yet. So it's kind of cool.
I went with the DVD liner notes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Laura sets out to find what you wanted the.
I mean, I just wrote down the TV guide one, but it's you do you. This is yours.
Laura sets out to find the real killer when an actor who played her childhood hero, Atomic Man, is wanted for murder. And I just want to mention Conrad Janis, who plays Atomic Man, also was a supporting actor in a TV series called Quark, which very short-lived show created by Buck Henry, the same man who, along with Mel Brooks, created Get Smart. Quark, I think it only lasted like 10 episodes. It's one of those shows that's kind of quirky, never got an audience, wasn't given a chance to get an audience, but it was kind of fun. It was kind of humorous. So if you ever get a chance to, check it out.
Yeah, I'll have to do that.
Anyway, we start out with a black and white sequence, supposedly from the old TV series Atomic Man. And we see a character in a lab-type room. He opens a safe, and as we see smoke come out of the safe, what?
Yeah, right. I mean, this is a weird scenario all around, because like in the background you've got beakers bubbling. There's like liquids all like this doesn't look like a safe laboratory, is what I'm gonna say.
Well, I mean, it's a typical TV and movie laboratory, except for the smoke coming out of this. I mean, what have you got in a safe that's smoking? And
good question.
Should it really be in a safe?
Yeah, that's a very good question.
Anyway, as we see the smoke coming out of the safe, we see this character reach in with a pair of tongs, and then with the tongs, he pulls out a tall test tube, which is foaming. Again, what are you doing putting a test tube?
It's a cappuccino machine. I swear it's probably just like he's making his pumpkin spice latte and everything goes horribly wrong.
Ooh, evil. Oh, no.
This is why you don't want it. This is why you stay away from it. I'm just saying.
Anyway, so he grabs the test tube with the tongs. He moves the test tube to the workbench, places the tube, which has a base on the bottom, fortunately, places it on the workbench. Otherwise, it would just fall over. Then he uses a pipette to move a small quantity of liquid from the test tube to a beaker, which is above a burner. The chemical reaction that begins shakes the workbench, and all the bottles and beakers and other items that are on it start clattering and rocking. And then suddenly there's an explosion. And as the smoke of the explosion fills the screen, we hear a voice saying, "A laboratory experiment explodes, transforming everyday scientist Mark Slate into the Atomic Man." And
I gotta say, you've got a good, like, you remember that guy that did all the, like, in a world where...
In a world.
Yeah, you sound just like him. That was good.
So anyway, then we see a character in a really cheesy costume.
It's so cheesy.
Stop bank robbers by taking their guns and zapping them with some sort of a beam. And the narrator continues, "A force with such power the world has never known." And then we see Atomic Man tear the door off of a burning car and rescue a woman just before that car explodes. Then we see him swoop in and throw his cape over an open manhole to save a blind man from falling in. And the image freezes on Atomic Man as the narrator continues. "Mark uses his superhuman strength to rid the world of crime and injustice wherever he finds it." And then the image changes to show an American flag waving in the breeze as the words "Atomic Man" zoom onto the screen over the image of the flag. And the announcer finishes, "In an endless battle to bring peace to mankind."
You gotta love how it's an endless battle to bring peace. I'm not sure you're achieving what you're setting out to achieve there, but okay.
Anyway, so then we hear the sound of applause, and the image pulls back to reveal that what we've just seen is being projected on a large screen above a stage, platform, dais, whatever. And then we see behind that a backdrop, which has a huge placard which reads, "Atomic Man, the movie." And on a highlighted circle on the floor in front of that backdrop is a man who begins speaking to the audience. The man, Stephen Spooner, tells the audience that the clip they have just seen was from the original Atomic Man TV series. Okay, so far so good.
Mm-hmm.
Then comes the condescension and the dismissiveness and the insults, calling its directing poor, the writing simplistic, and the lead actor, at best, adequate.
So here's my question.
Go ahead.
You're trying to promote the movie that you're making, but you're going to stand there and basically just destroy your source material in front of the press.
Okay. I'm getting to that. That because I've got so much commentary on that.
This is not a good marketing strategy.
Well, no, it's not. It really isn't. But it is indicative of so many other things.
That's true.
So as he goes on, despite what he considers the show's failures, it is enjoying a phenomenal success in syndication because it gives people something they want, a hero. And he continues saying that when he first saw Atomic Man, he knew that one day he would make it into a big budget feature. In short, despite what he says about loving the show, he actually hates the show.
Oh, yeah. Completely hates it.
But it's popular. And I smell money.
I was going to say, dump truck full of money, pulled up to his lawn, dumped it on him, and he's like, ha-ha. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And of course, so, and the funny thing is this really predates a lot of what we saw in reality of people who come out and I loved this TV show as a kid. Everything about it sucks, but that's okay because I'm going to make it a masterpiece.
Yeah.
So, then we wind up, they rip out all the things about the show that made it beloved and they crank up the hokey portions, turning it into a piece of dreck full of juvenile humor, unfunny stupidity, and they're spitting in the faces of the fans of the show.
Yeah, or what you get is the studio will realize that something has become popular again, and they will hire somebody for the name that knows nothing about the property. Doesn't even like, you get something like, okay, we're going to do Superman, but we're going to hire Michael Bay, right? And then they attach a big name director to the project and just like don't even bother to try to find out anything about it as a property.
And so as a result, we wind up with things like the Green Hornet or McHale's Navy or Wild Wild West or I Spy or anything from J.J. Abrams.
Both versions of the Fantastic Four and bombed spectacularly. Yeah.
And the fact that these movies never have sequels, never have, it doesn't become a franchise, tells you everything you need to know about that original film and about the people that produced it. So anyway.
Or you get a situation like with X-Men, with the first X-Men movie, where initially Joss Whedon wrote he was hired to do it. He walked away from the project because there were too many cooks in the kitchen, and he said, I can't work with this. We've seen what he's done with Avengers, so we know he could have done it and done a good job of it. But they basically threw out all of his script with the exception of a couple of lines that were delivered so poorly because the director that then took over had no idea how it was supposed to be delivered, and it was a mess. So it's you get a lot of this like that. I think a lot of the time the problem comes when the studios don't understand what it is that drew people to it in the first place. And when you have a bunch of suits that are going, oh hey, this is enjoying some popularity, we're just going to slap the name on it, but do our own thing completely. That's when you have this happen. And here's the thing. I don't disagree. They needed to pick a new actor. Like I know this is a big source of frustration for the actor in Max in the episode, but like if they were doing this 20 years later, you couldn't, you do have to recast.
But the other thing is that you get people, like you say, who don't understand the show or whose, how to say it, their sense of, in the case of a comedy, their sense of humor doesn't match the original tone of the show.
Yep.
Or you get somebody in charge who is a so-called comic actor for something that's not supposed to be funny. And so then you wind up with something like the Green Hornet with Seth Rogen. Seth Rogen? Excuse me, the Green Hornet 1966? Has Seth Rogen ever seen the Green Hornet 1966? It was not a comedy.
On behalf of Canada, we apologize for Seth Rogen. But another example of that would be 21 Jump Street, which was a television show. It was a police drama. It was never a comedy. And it was, it got a bit cheesy at times. It was late 80s, early 90s. It had Johnny Depp in his first sort of like major role. But it was a drama. It tackled some really serious issues. And they turned it into a comedy with Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill. And it was like vulgar, sort of juvenile college humor. And I'm watching it going, did they see the show at all? Like, did they, what? What did you, how?
Well, it's like the same thing where you remember here a few years back, there was talk about a Remington Steele reboot as a 30-minute comedy. Excuse me?
So glad that didn't happen.
Have you seen the show?
Yeah. Really glad that didn't happen because everything else in my childhood has been strip mined at this point for legacy sequels and reboots and remakes. And so there's a few things left that I'm glad haven't been touched. This is one of them, as well as Labyrinth. Don't touch Labyrinth. David Bowie's gone. We can't do it again.
The best illustration of this mentality that I can, and this approach that I can think of is taking a Cadillac logo and slapping it on the side of a Yugo and saying, it's a Cadillac. It's like, no, it's not. I don't care how many people you get to say that's a Cadillac. It's not a Cadillac. And that's what they do with these movies.
A Tesla Cybertruck and calling it a vehicle at all.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's funny how it looks like a garbage can and dumpster.
It looks like the futuristic cars in Total Recall. We watched that recently, and I'm like, hey, Tesla Cybertrucks in this movie.
Those Cybertrucks, what a joke. Anyway, you know, and talking about Spooner here, I do have to say that he makes Phil Haver from Stealing the Show look good in comparison.
He really does.
Because at least Phil Haver was stealing money from rich people and not insulting the audience. And Haver never actually made a movie. You know,
it's true.
So he didn't inflict it on an audience.
Well, and even worse, like, and I'm not gonna assume that somebody who's younger wouldn't necessarily be a fan, but this kid, this guy, he's like what, 12? You know, he's still like going through puberty. If you're going with a property that is established and has like a fan base from 20, 30 years ago, chances are, and I could be wrong, it could be something like he grew up watching it, but most of the time, if you hire some young maverick, they're just looking to make a name. They don't maybe even know anything about the property, and this looks to be the case with Spooner. He's, you know.
Well, and we actually find out later that
it was Davenport.
He kind of does fit that bill. Anyway, so back into the episode. Spooner continues saying that the linchpin to the entire project was, of course, finding the right actor.
Yeah.
And at this, he calls up his associate, Jennifer Davenport, to join him. And she's wearing, and this is kind of maybe sort of important, she's wearing an almond-colored medium-length skirt and a matching jacket with a black lapel over a white blouse and with a scarf-like item wrapped around her neck. And like I say, you know, right now that isn't significant, except it does become involved later in a piece of business. So keep that in mind. Anyway, so she steps over to join him and he gives her a kiss. Spooner continues saying that he and Jennifer scoured the country looking for the one man who could embody the virtues of the Atomic Man character and yet still have the look of the 80s. They didn't want just another hunk. They wanted an actor with ability, an actor with depth, an actor with sincerity, which in Hollywood speak means that they got a second-rate actor who probably couldn't act his way out of a wet paper bag with a sharp knife and is just another cookie-cutter Hollywood hunk.
I was going to say those are all synonyms for biceps. Because that's literally, and the funniest part about it is that if you watch that clip from the original show, it's clear that Max Donahue was never a hunk. Like even back when the show was on, he was an ordinary looking guy, which makes sense. If you've got a series about a scientist that accidentally gives himself magical powers, he's not going to look like Dolph Lundgren. He's going to look like, I don't know, what's his face from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids? Rick Moranis, right? Like you're going to get a kind of like nerdy looking dude. So the fact that he's like, we didn't want just another hunk. We wanted depth. We wanted blah, blah, blah. And then they bring out He-Man. He's like, okay, this is what depth and integrity and okay, sure. That's what that looks like. Yeah. Sure. He definitely looks like actually, no, wait a minute. He's a scientist that screws up monumentally and gives himself magical powers. Okay, yeah, that might work. He looks like he can't spell his name. That might work.
Even if it was somebody else wrote it down for him and he was just treating it. Yeah,
exactly.
Anyway, so ladies and gentlemen, I give you the star of Atomic Man, the movie, Britt Bostwick. I mean, even his name sounds fake, insincere, and shallow.
Well, I wonder too if it's supposed to kind of emulate like some of those older like Rock Hudson or you know what I mean? Those types of names that were maybe not even their real names, but they're using them because they sound good. Most of them weren't. You know? Yeah, exactly.
Rock Hudson was not his real name. Cary Grant was not his real name.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know. Yeah.
And
anyway, so
Bostwick is being escorted by two like scantily clad women. I'm pretty sure that probably wasn't part of the original show either.
No. So anyway, as you say, he steps out from behind the backdrop with his accompaniment, wearing an updated version of the Atomic Man costume we saw before, which only means that it still looks just as hokey, but it's made out of nicer material.
Pretty much.
From the back of the hall, we hear a voice hollering, "Wait a minute! Wait a minute!" And a balding middle-aged man, the actor we previously saw in the black and white clip, pushes his way to the front of the crowd declaring, "This man is an imposter. I'm Atomic Man." And Spooner, obviously trying to deal with the unexpected intruder, very awkwardly announces,
so awkwardly,
a hand for my surprise guest, a fine actor. A fine actor? You just said the acting was at best second rate.
Yeah.
Who originally portrayed Atomic Man, Maxwell Donahue.
So here's a way to circumvent this whole issue, right? Because again, you can't. I don't think anyone would disagree that if you were mounting a film franchise of a show that ended several decades ago, and it's a superhero show, you're probably not going to be able to use the original guy as the hero. It's just not going to work. That being said, if you want to honor the fans and the show, right? Mm-hmm. If the original actor is openly outspoken against the project, that's going to turn fans immediately against it too.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're not going to want to watch it if the original guy is saying, "This is going to suck, don't watch it, it's terrible." Or that they turned me away and wouldn't let me be involved. What you do is you give the guy a part that's not Atomic Man. You give him another role in the film. Maybe it's a mentor part. Maybe it's a cameo. Maybe it's whatever. But you give him a part and you use that in your marketing. Like, featuring Maxwell Donahue as, Atomic Man's father or something like that. So that the fans can see that the original actor has not only given his blessing, but is still part of the project, right? He's still in the world.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There was
They did that with The Flash, the TV show. Because the original show, the 1990 show that had John Wesley Shipp played the Flash in the 1990 series. It only lasted for one season, right? It gets canceled, and then they mount the show again with I can't remember his name, but the Grant Gustin, who was fantastic. But they have John Wesley Shipp on the show as an alternate version of the Flash, and his character, it was awesome. Like it really helped make the show matter to those who watched the series from the 90s and those who were watching it now. So there's no reason they couldn't have made him a part of it.
Yeah, there's and I cannot think of it. There was a movie where the original actor appeared as himself. Many years later. But the movie was about like his son or somebody else taking over the role. And so he was there, as you said, kind of the mentor figure or to give blessing to the transition.
Exactly. Like if Spooner had done that and used Maxwell in the marketing, have him there talking about I was Atomic Man, I'm passing the torch figuratively, literally, whatever it have you, it would work. It would really work. Instead, he tries, as you said, to awkwardly incorporate him when he shows up, and it doesn't go well.
Yeah. Now, and as much as I hold the Green Hornet movie in contempt, and it's not just because of Seth Rogen. I do have to say that the one thing that he did do right was he didn't try to recreate the 1966 series with himself playing the 1966 version of the Green Hornet.
No, you have to
brought
update
it forward, and it was like, well, this was my dad's. What was he? He was he wasn't the original 66 Reed. He was a generation or two down the road. And he discovers this about his dad, and he takes it over. And then from that point on, the movie goes downhill. Anyway,
I was going to say, but then it sucks.
So anyway, yes, as I was saying, he just gets done insulting the man, and then turns around and calls him a fine actor. And of course, there's a couple of words that come to mind to describe Spooner in this moment: insincere, hypocrite, liar, politician. Oh, sorry, I wasn't supposed to include politicians because they are absolutely above reproach.
Always truthful.
Yes. Anyway, as Spooner is trying to control the situation, Jennifer actually takes control steps away from the center stage and sends the security guard over to deal with the unwelcome intrusion. Well, as the guards are taking Donahue away, he declares to Spooner that he can't treat him this way. He gave his best years of his life to that character, and that he's the only one who can play Atomic Man, and he's the only one that will. And Spooner, still trying to save face, tells the gathered that he loves that man. You're beautiful, man.
Yeah, as they're yanking him away. Like as if nobody can see the fact that he's being forcibly dragged out of the room.
That's right. But hey, it's a friendly Hollywood press, and we'll just kind of pretend none of that ever happened, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I feel bad for Max because, and he talks about this later, so I'm not going to get into it too much. But like, if this was the part that defined him, and then to see the studios, the Hollywood machine, essentially do it again, but just ignore him completely, that's gotta hurt. I mean, obviously he can't play Atomic Man, and he probably even knows that to an extent, but he's just like, that would be a slap in the face for sure. Yeah.
So anyway, as you said, the guards are dragging him out of the room, and then Donahue calls out to Spooner, calling him a treacherous snake, and then he shouts, "I'll kill you before I let you destroy my creation." Well, first of all, it wasn't actually your creation.
I had that in my notes. Like, unless you as the actor were also the producer and the showrunner, it's not your creation. You just embodied somebody else's vision.
That's right.
But it does sort of point to, there are some actors who view acting purely as a job, and that's fine, because that's what it is. Like, and it's funny because there's a lot of fans that get very angry when actors say, well, it was a job and I did my job and I wasn't that attached to it.
Get a life.
Right. But then there's other actors that become so attached to their character and very protective of it, and very like, if we go to Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, Nana Visitor, I'm not entirely sure how to say it, but she portrayed Major Kira in Deep Space Nine. And if you hear her speak of that character, she's fiercely protective of all of the story choices and everything that character did and said. And it's interesting how some actors will approach, this is a job, I did my job, I've done my job. And others will be like, no, this character is an extension of myself, and I'm not going to let you hurt it. Both approaches are valid. I think fans tend to respect the actor more when they attach themselves to a character, but I don't really see any reason for that personally. It's a job, you're hired,
Well, and then you have the kind of the middle ground where, and Shatner, for all of his get a life, he's
come around since.
Leonard Nimoy, although he was a little bit, the way he did it was a little bit slimy, but Adam West as Batman 66. Shatner and West both originally were frustrated by being typecast as those characters, but then later came to embrace and appreciate what those characters did for them as actors. And I don't think Adam West really did a whole lot of work after Batman 66. He did continue to work, but it wasn't anything high profile. But he really, after a while, realized what a gift that character was, or what that role was to him, and he embraced it, and he became well loved by all the fans. So in fact, he was so well thought of that he had a character on Kim Possible created kind of in his honor.
Nice.
So and he voiced it. It was brain fart. I just had it in my head here. Anyway, but
you've got most of these situations where these characters become typecast like this are for genre shows. You rarely see this happen. I mean, you get that actor that's sort of a cop in everything that they appear in, but like, a lot of these typecasted actors are in science fiction, fantasy, and these types of programs, and then they become
Westerns.
Yeah, they become so synonymous with this one character that they can't shake it no matter what they do.
Or one type of character. I think it was DeForest Kelley was for a long time a heavy. He was a bad guy. And it wasn't until he was cast in Star Trek that he got out of that. But yeah, he was like many actors. If it wasn't a specific character, it was a specific type of character.
Yeah.
So anyway, so yes, Max Donahue is drug out of the press briefing. And of course, if we hadn't figured it out already, we know who's going to die and we know who's going to be accused. And then we fade into an office. Spooner is behind a desk in a leather high-backed office chair with Jennifer Davenport giving him a head massage. Then she moves her hands down to his shoulders. Apparently their relationship is more professional, or
less professional.
Maybe it's a different kind of professional. But it's certainly more than professional. Anyway, Spooner's happy. Jennifer, not so much. Spooner asks her if she thinks it went well. And she, of course, assures him that the crowd thought it was terrific. And, of course, having gotten the required ego boost, Spooner laughs.
She's massaging his head as well as his ego.
Yeah. Let's stop there. Anyway, Spooner laughs, agreeing that, yes, they did think he was terrific, didn't they? And he loves show business. And, of course, the more he gloats, the more unhappy Jennifer seems to become. And Spooner then asks if she thinks that has-been Donahue brought things down. No, the press ate it up, she says. Spooner gets up from his chair and says, "Did you hear the reaction when they heard I landed Roger Foreman to produce? The man's a legend, hasn't made a picture in decades, and he comes out of retirement to work with me. Isn't that beautiful?" And yeah.
Hasn't made a film in decades.
Yeah, this is probably not a good move.
No, it wouldn't be. And not only that, but if you're looking to do something updated and flashy, using somebody that hasn't worked in a couple decades is probably not going to be the way to go here if you're wanting something modern and forward thinking.
Yeah. Now, I mean, there's a good argument for somebody maybe like that if they're from that generation of the original source material.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, if they haven't been working for decades, they're probably out of touch with modern techniques and
production methods, equipment, special effects, like all kinds of stuff.
Anyway, as Spooner continues to just praise himself, we can see more and more steam rolling off of Jennifer's head. And then we find out why. They were supposed to be partners, and not only had he not told her about Foreman, she was supposed to produce. That's what he'd promised her when she signed on to the project, except I'll bet it's not in the contract. And in Hollywood, promises aren't worth the paper they're not printed on.
Yeah, exactly.
But as always, as the line from the old White Christmas song goes, there's always someone higher up where you can pass the buck. And that's what Spooner does. He says, "It's not you, it's me." No, it's not me, it's you. After all, it's $25 million project. And so the studio wanted somebody with experience.
Do you think that's the case? Because I actually took it to believe
he's
that.
Full of it.
I actually took him at face value because this to me seems exactly like something the studios would do. Look at Braveheart.
Especially if he went to the studio and said, "I don't want her to be producer."
Well, okay, maybe, but like if you look at the movie Braveheart, okay, directed by Mel Gibson, and the studio, like you've got a legendary Scottish hero who's supposed to be young, like the character's supposed to be in like early 20s, okay, and the studio said, "No, we're only going to finance this if you play the character, if you play the lead." And Gibson argued, "I'm too old for this. Like, I'm in my 40s. I should not be in this role." And they're like, no, we need a name. Sometimes they don't care about anything, but we need a name. And if like Spooner's young, Davenport is a woman, plus she's young, right? Two things like kind of against her here. It actually wouldn't surprise me if the studio said, "All right, we'll give you your project, but you need a name attached to produce it." Now, she could be co-producer. That's where Spooner comes in. Like, he cuts her out completely. You can have more than one producer. They do it all the time.
Well, see, the thing is, though, we don't know what Jennifer's background is. She may be an experienced producer. We don't know. We don't get this information. So.
No, I'm going by her youth, though. She looks like she's late 20s, early 30s, right?
Right. But she still could have been producer on some small projects.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, this is a huge project, comparatively speaking, for the time.
Probably with a big budget.
But is it really a safer bet to go with somebody who's a name that probably the current generation of film people really don't know? Because
I'm not saying it's a good idea.
No, but from the standpoint of
think.
Well, that's what I'm trying to approach it from is the studio's thinking. If I was a studio executive, would I think it's a good idea to go after this guy who has not done a movie in decades and bring him on to do a project just because he had a big name 20 years ago? Or would I be better off to go with somebody who is maybe less experienced but more current, more up to date, and does have modern production credits? Maybe get somebody who's experienced to work with her as a co-producer or something. But yeah, no, if
you think about it, studios do this all the time and it works because look at, for example, because producers aren't directors. Directors have the creative vision, right? Producers, they're sort of more in the background, sort of setting things up and making sure all the pieces fall together. But if you look at, for example, The Nightmare Before Christmas, right? Very, very sort of famous film associated with Tim Burton. Tim Burton did not direct it, but most people don't know that because when you see the trailer for the film, it'll say from the mind of Tim Burton. And yeah, Tim Burton conceived the idea, but the director wrote the script and directed it. I don't even remember his name, and nobody ever does. They just assume because it has that Tim Burton look to it, that it's Tim Burton. So my guess is they wanted a name to attach to the project that people knew, even if it was from 20 years ago, whatever, and that they just went, okay, they probably did it with Spooner. Spooner probably agreed to it because it means it pushes his star forward, but they probably said, you'll have the creative vision. We just need this guy to kind of helm it, to say from the mind of so-and-so, and then you do what you want. We'll cut her out. Yeah. We don't need her.
Well, I think there's more evidence that Spooner was behind this the entire time and that he probably didn't even offer her to the studio. No, he didn't offer her to the studio as producer. And we find this out here in just a little bit because Jennifer angrily says that the entire project was her idea. She got the studio interested. She got Spooner involved. She went to the Matt to get the rights to do the movie. And, I wonder if I should read that note.
What's it? I have to.
She went to the mat? I wonder if she means to the couch or to her knees. Anyway,
in the 80s, probably.
Yeah.
A lot of, unfortunately, that was part and parcel of the show business.
Yeah. But anyway, Spooner says not a problem. He promises to take care of her. In the same way, he promised her that she would be the producer. So you know how much this promise is worth. But better than letting her be producer, he's going to let her be his executive assistant.
Oh, can I?
So she's gone from producer to associate and now executive errand girl and arm decoration.
I mean, I kind of don't even blame her for killing him at this point. It's just, you're just sort of yeah, murder's bad, but he's kind of toxic and awful. So.
Yeah. Well, and she explodes over this and saying that he expects her to fetch his coffee and polish his ego. No thanks. And dismissively, disinterestedly, and emotionally unaffected, Spooner says, hey, you don't want to be part of the project? Well, that's your choice, not mine.
This is exactly what he was hoping she would do. Yeah.
And now we find out why. He sits back down in his chair. Jennifer's look goes from shock to anger to slow dawned realization, saying it's not only the project he's dismissing her from, it's from them as a couple. She accusingly says, you're bored with me. And Spooner gives a slight chuckle and shrugs and says that, he always did have a short attention span.
Oof.
Yeah. So that's why, he never offered her to the studio as a producer. That's why he never offered her to the studio as a co-producer. This was his way of just getting her completely out of his life.
Yeah.
So anyway, with determination and a set jaw, Jennifer warns him that he's not going to get rid of her that easily. But Spooner says, baby, you're gone. Well, Jennifer says nothing, and then after a brief moment, turns and walks out of the room. Well, if we hadn't figured it out already, now we have a good idea who the murderer probably really is.
Yeah.
Anyway, we are at the agency. We see Laura sitting in a chair at her office, staring straight ahead. And although we can't see it, we know she's watching Atomic Man as we hear the theme music for the Atomic Man show and the narrator speaking that, though many evil forces have tried, none yet have discovered the secret source of Atomic Man's great power. And of course, as this is happening,
there's a lab mistake.
What? Yeah. As this is happening,
a lab mistake. Sorry.
As this is happening, we see the door behind her open slowly, and Steele leans his head in. He hears the sound, freezes for a moment, and then continues to lean into the doorway. Then slowly and carefully and quietly, he steps in, pushes the door closed behind him, careful not to let the latch make a noise. Finally got through it. Anyway, we see Laura's face as she grins with forbidden pleasure at her secret vice. Steele creeps up behind her. Go ahead.
Can I ask a question about the TV? Because you might be able to answer this. And I most TVs back then, and I remember because we had one, had like 3 channels, and you had to like control it with like a box. This would like how would this?
Well, okay, they had TV more than 3 channels. Now you might only get 3 channels, but the TV had 2 through 13, and then most of them at that time also had a U setting, which allowed you to access another dial, which gave you channels like 14 through 100 something or other. So that's how most big TVs worked. Now, the TV she's using here has a little dial on it, and it's a wheel, and you just turned it, and it was like a old style car radio. You know, you had the little knob and you turned it, and the little indicator slid left or right to show you what station you were on.
Would she have to pay for cable with that though? No,
it was over the air. So it was all over the air. Back then, cable was still fairly new, and most people didn't have it. It was just you get an antenna for your TV at home. You put a big antenna on top of the house, looked like a
Oh, we had the rabbit ear Fox family viewing positions, but But
yeah, these little ones would have pull-out antennas, just a straight rod antenna, like on an old style portable radio. You know, you pull it out and it telescopes out. That's what these had, except that they were also on a hinge, so you could lay it down and snap it into place so that it would out of the way when you were carrying it around in your purse or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I used to have one, not quite that small, but I did have one.
It was really small.
Yeah.
It was really tiny in the episode. It's just got like this little, I can't imagine the visual quality on that must have been awful because the show itself would not have had great visual quality. And then you add the fact that the TV's so tiny,
Well, surprisingly enough, that show, Atomic Man, would have had the same resolution, the same image quality as Remington Steele. The difference being that one was black and white and one was color.
Yeah.
The image quality didn't change. It was still 640 by 4. I think it was it 640 by 480? It may not have been that high, but it had the same number of pixels across and down, regardless of the size of the screen. And that's a mistake a lot of people make, is they think, well, I'll just make the picture bigger. I get this picture off the internet. I'm just going to print a big copy of it. And it's like, no, because it's still only so many squares across and so many squares down. All you're doing is making the squares bigger. You're not increasing the resolution of it. And it wasn't until, I don't know, it was after Remington Steele that television quality actually improved. But,
right.
And the other thing is that if you using the example I just mentioned of taking a picture off the internet and blowing it up big, you look at it, you print it out on an 8x10 piece of paper and it looks just terrible. But it looks so great on the screen. Well, that's also what happens. So you lose the ability to see some very, very fine detail because it's just so small. But overall, the image quality actually appears better on a smaller screen than it does on a bigger screen. It all has to do with, the size perception to your eyes. Video glasses, you put them on, they've got these little
to your eyes.
Screens, it go right into your eyes. Yeah. They seem to be high resolution, but that's because even though they're small, they're up close, and the apparent field of vision is much larger than it would be for a larger TV much farther away. But anyway.
I like how you just blew past my size joke with the perception of the eyes. And anyway, just keep going. Objects in this may be closer than they appear.
Are we talking shirts? Oh,
she's watching TV. Steele sneaks up behind her.
Yes, objects in this T-shirt may be larger than they appear. Screams up behind her, and of course, as he does, the camera pulls back, and we and Steele see at the same time that Laura is in fact holding that miniature television in her lap that you just asked about. Still unnoticed, Steele leans forward, putting his lips near Laura's ear, and intentionally loudly enough to startle Laura says, "Atomic Man?" And she jumps, nearly dropping the television, and quickly turns it off, collapses the antenna, and then, embarrassed at having been caught, makes the excuse that, well, she was just really waiting for the news, just a quick look at the day's events, weather, stock market quotations. Really, Laura? Stock market quotations?
I'm no expert, but the news usually, generally would have aired around in the evening, right? There might have been an afternoon broadcast, but I'm guessing middle of the day wasn't primetime news hour.
No, but some stations had like a 30-minute news show, from 11 to 11:30 or noon.
It's probably whatever that news network was from Steele in the News. Yeah. Spotlight News Team.
Yeah. Yes. Anyway, so yes, Chrissy. Laura sets the television on her desk, and Steele, somewhat accusingly, reminds her that their client, Mooney, the Carpet King, is waiting in his office, and he hopes that she knows her cut pile from her loot pile. And Laura says she'll just get her notes and turns away slightly to open the drawer and pull out a file. Well, Steele picks up the television and turns it on, and we hear the voice of Donahue saying, "Go ahead and shoot. You can't hurt me. I'm Atomic Man. I have a great power that radiates from inside me and cannot be extinguished." And as the dialogue is playing out on the television, Laura is again captivated and distracted from more pressing matters. And Steele glances at Laura, commenting that the dialogue is wonderfully dreadful. Well,
there's something enjoyable, though, in bad dialogue sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's something, sometimes bad is fun.
Yeah. Witness Mystery Science Theater 2000.
Yes, exactly.
Anyway, Laura's head snaps around with a hard, insulted look on her face, and she jerks the television from Steele's hand, turns it off, and coldly tells him that the show is timeless. And Steele, nearly looking down his nose at her, almost literally, condescendingly comments, "Fan, are you?" And she once again puts the television away, telling Steele that she used to watch the show as a child. It purported all the values her mother wanted her to adopt: goodness, truth, and justice.
This is interesting that it's her mother that she cites first, since later on we find that her more treasured memories of the show are from watching it with her dad. I cannot see Abigail Holt in any way, shape, or form being like, "You should watch Atomic Man." I don't. That doesn't.
No. But the characteristics of goodness, truth, and justice, I think Laura is equating those with things that her mother wanted her to learn. And she's done that maybe on her own.
Even that, I not that her mom's not a good person, but
yeah, it's
Abigail Holt is queen of passive aggressiveness and knowing your place in society. All we ever see Abigail Holt teach Laura is that you need to
have a man,
follow the rules, basically follow the rules that society has laid out for women, and more so women of her time than the 80s. So I don't know that truth and justice necessarily fit into that anywhere. It's mainly like, do what you're supposed to do, follow the script. That's kind of the impression I get of Abigail Holt. I'm thinking those values were from her dad, and she's not wanting to talk about her dad with Steele. She's made that sort of very clear.
And so it's just an easy translation.
Yeah.
And she could probably defend that her mother would want her to learn goodness, truth, and justice because, she was a good mother and following the rules. That is kind of the goodness and truth and justice in some people's minds. But anyway, condescendingly, Steele asks if those values included chastity.
Ouch.
And
wow.
Yeah. Adopting a somewhat stern attitude as she stands, Laura tells Steele that it was those values that she had in mind when she created Remington Steele. And Steele, forgetting that he's not really Remington Steele, but merely an interloper, haughtily says that he doesn't particularly care for the fact that his origins have come from a comic book television hero. And Laura,
that's perfectly in keeping with his character, though, because he sees himself as more of like the charming rogue, and to find out that she envisioned him or his persona as somebody in spandex would be like an offense to every part of him. But at the same time, he kind of deserves it for basically saying, "Oh, did he teach you to be a prude as well?" Because that's kind of what that chastity remark was about, and that was really out of left field and kind of below the belt, like rude.
And annoyed, Laura continues on saying that it was that television hero who in some part inspired her to choose this profession. Now Steele dismissively tells her, Steele tells her that, well, that's good for Mr. Mooney because she was so inspired. And now perhaps she could be inspired to join forces with Steele to do battle with the evil carpet thieves of the world.
This episode has my favorite joke in it of all time. And when we get there, you'll know it. Because it's just too good.
Laura frowns. I have a feeling I know what it is. And
you know what it is, don't you?
I'm not sure, but I think I might have an idea. Anyway, let's keep it clean. Anyway, Laura frowns and quite put out with Steele's attitudes. She stands up and, refusing to look at Steele, walks out of the room. Well, next it's night. At the Center Hollywood Studios, Maxwell Donahue is at the security entrance gate with his Atomic Man costume on.
Oh, he kept it. Poor guy.
Well, some people do keep things from their shows that they've been on. The guard is looking at his clipboard and after a moment tells Donahue that no, his name isn't on the list. Donahue insists that it has to be. Spooner's office called him no more than an hour ago. So check with them. You'll see. And of course, the way he says it, it seems like he's lying. Well, the guard finally accedes to Donahue's instructions and steps over to the phone and calls. And as he does, the other guard gets up, steps over to the first guard and asks, "Hey, isn't that the loon they booted out of here earlier?" Well, inside Spooner's office, or maybe not.
No, this would be just Jennifer Davenport's
Jennifer's office. Yeah. Okay. Somebody made a typo. We see Jennifer stepping over to pick up the ringing phone. She answers, pauses, then hollers, "Absolutely not." Then, moderating her voice to a more sympathetic tone, says, "No, the man has been harassing Mr. Spooner for days. Thank you." And then somewhat suspiciously, gently warns, "Be careful. He has a violent temper." She hangs up the phone and then with a somewhat devious smirk turns and walks out of the room. Back down at the security gate. The guard tells Donahue, "Sorry, not happening." Well, Max is frustrated and no longer sounding like he's lying. He insists that this is ridiculous. He was told to get into his costume and come down to the studio to see Spooner. He pulls his mask over his head and insists that seeing Spooner is exactly what he's going to do. And he begins to walk past the guard onto the lot. Well, the guard grabs Donahue, calls out to his companion who rushes out and also lays hands on Donahue. And together they drag him back through the gate off the lot.
I gotta say, I had some sympathy for Jennifer Davenport. And like I said, the world will not miss Steven Spooner. But like setting this poor guy up when he's done nothing wrong, that sucks. I get it. it seems like the perfect opportunity considering what happened at the press conference, but still, like, poor guy.
Anyway, back inside, we see Jennifer walk over to an entertainment center cabinet and open it. Inside is a television and what appears to be various pieces of stereo sound equipment and a Betamax video machine. And I mention this because on the shelf, those videotapes that we see don't really look like beta tapes. They look like VHS tapes.
They don't. They are VHS tapes, 100%. I had that in my notes as well because I was like, that doesn't make any sense.
Won't fit.
They're not going to fit in there. The betas are smaller. Anyway,
so we see her grab a videotape and put it into the machine, and then she turns on the television, then hits the play button on the VCR. And we then see the very beginning of the opening sequence of the Atomic Man credits. Jennifer presses the pause button on the VCR remote, stopping playback on the VCR, and turns the television off. Then she presses a button on the front of the VCR, but off to the side, away from the transport controls. And I'm wondering, what is that button and why does she push it? I'm not really sure.
I was a little confused.
The script is to be believed, she's resetting the playback counter to 0, which I'm not sure that is of any value because that counter, unless it's a digital counter, it was a mechanical, on a lot of those old beta machines, it was a mechanical counter. And it would just keep going and going. It didn't necessarily reset when you put a new tape in. But anyway, she steps over to the wall clock, changes the time from 10:47 to 10:59. Then she steps over to the door, pulls it open, and calls out to Hazel, one of the after-hours cleaning staff. I had to wonder, given that this is a show about old TV shows, I wonder if the Hazel name came as a reference to the old Hazel TV series. Anyway, Hazel comes to the door, and Jennifer asks her if she could clean her office now because she has an important phone call to make and doesn't want to be interrupted. Hazel doesn't have a problem changing her routine because, well, she doesn't have psychological issues about changes of routine as some of us do.
Hey, I feel called out by that.
No, I was talking about myself.
Okay. I was like, I'm in this statement and I don't like it.
Perfectly good way to screw up my morning and my day.
Same.
Is for something in my morning routine to get changed just a little bit. Yeah, it goes downhill from there. Anyway, Jennifer closes the door as Hazel goes to grab her vacuum cleaner. She steps back over to the entertainment center, grabs the VCR remote, and then sits down at her desk, hiding the remote beneath the file folder. Hazel comes in with her vacuum cleaner and a bottle of glass cleaner. And as she does, Jennifer asks her the time, saying that her contacts are making everything blurry. Serious?
I gotta say, this is a really smart plan.
Yeah, except for the contacts thing. I mean, what's her excuse? My contacts are making things blurry because my optometrist is a quack and couldn't prescribe the correct.
No, actually, I used to wear contacts. If you have your contacts in for too long, then they can absolutely start to like make your eyes blurry because they kind of like. Especially if you like fall asleep, you're not supposed to fall asleep with your contacts on because they can actually get stuck to your eyes and damage them. And if you leave them in too long, longer than they're recommended to be left in, they can cause your eyes to become blurry and unfocused.
Really?
So that actually makes sense.
Okay. I've never had contacts, so I don't know.
And if you think about it, contacts back then, possibly, I don't know if the technology changed at all to make them better, but I'm guessing not, or at least, they probably weren't. Yeah, that part didn't strike me as odd.
Long-term contacts, I don't know when they came into play. Maybe you know.
That's why we have Google.
Anyway. Yes. So anyway, Hazel comes in. She's a kind, sweet soul who's always trying to be helpful. And so she looks at the clock and reports to Jennifer that it's 11 o'clock on the button. Oh, wow. Just in time for Atomic Man. Hazel, would you turn the TV set on, please? Sure, no problem. Yeah, she turns the television set on, and Jennifer grabs the VCR remote she's been hiding beneath the file folder and starts the playback so that as the television comes on, we see the opening sequence for Atomic Man. Hazel begins cleaning, and then we have a time jump, and we see that Hazel has stopped her cleaning to watch Atomic Man with Jennifer eyeing her from the desk.
Okay, can I just quickly because I did a quick Google search. Technically, there has been some version of contact lenses for like a long time, but soft contact lenses weren't introduced until 1971, and you didn't get extended or like longer wear contact lenses introduced until 1986. So
after this.
Yeah. If you wear them too long, they're going to mess with your eyes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, on the television screen, Atomic Man is battling an evil henchman. Atomic Man has the bad guy up against the tall male slot rack. But then the villain manages to shove Atomic Man away, throws him back against the tall metal cabinet holding some sort of technical-looking dials and gauges. But never fear, with a burst of atomic power, Atomic Man gives the mad scientist a double karate chop on the shoulders. The dastardly brute reels backwards into a large computer cabinet, and Atomic Man grabs his shoulders all the while. Two men struggle with each other, then collapse on the floor. Then we see that the lab is aflame as Atomic Man hurls the rapscallion across the room and onto his back on the floor.
Bonus points for use of the words rapscallion. Nice.
The scoundrel pulls out his blaster gun and points it at Atomic Man, who is now standing up behind the counter in the lab. Our hero declares, "Go ahead, shoot. The power of the atom is only realized when it is split." And the bad guy, who in this shot looks like it could have been Bernie Coppell, Dr. Bricker from Love Boat, Siegfried from Get Smart, in a cameo role of sorts, probably wearing a fright wig and a fake mustache. Anyway, fires a beam at Atomic Man, but Atomic Man holds out his hand, redirecting the beam back at the villain, who we are left to presume was vaporized by his own evil actions. At that point, Jennifer tells Hazel, she really needs to make that phone call now. And Hazel, who has been engrossed in the show,
hasn't done anything. Has not vacuumed, has not done any of her chores. She's just been watching TV.
Well, she's momentarily confused by the statement and then says, oh, yeah, sure thing. And she grabs her vacuum and bottle of window spray, untouched, and leaves the room.
Yeah.
And I have it right there. Undoubtedly gotten very little cleaning done in Jennifer's office. Well, Jennifer grabs the VCR remote, stops the tape, picks up the receiver on the phone from her desk, and then sets it aside, gets up and rushes over to the door, which she closes, making sure it's unlocked.
We should probably... Hey, kids, for those of you who don't know, if you wanted to make yourself unreachable, you used to take the phone off the hook.
And leave it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just putting it out there.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, she rushes over to the French doors on the back side of the office and makes sure that they're unlocked. She
unlocks it. So she can.
First she goes over to the front door, locks her main office door, then walks across to the French door to make sure it's unlocked. And as she does, she's pulling off the jacket that she's been wearing all day. And on the floor, she opens it. Wow, I cannot read today. At the door, she opens it and closes it again, apparently locking it or unlocking it. And back at her desk, she continues to undress. And then we see a shot of Spooner sitting at his desk reading a book. Then we see an uprised atomic scepter, which is then swung down to hit Spooner on the head. He pitches forward in his chair, stunned. After a moment, he stands and turns and recognizes that it's Jennifer under the Atomic Man costume holding the atomic scepter. She approaches him, scepter raised, then violently strikes him again. Spooner collapses to the floor, and raising the scepter one last time, Jennifer spits out through gritted teeth, "And don't call me baby." Then
it's a miracle she gets no blood at all on this costume.
Yeah.
The
scepter is like 18 inches, so I guess, yeah.
This isn't exactly a mess-free killing. If you're going to bludgeon someone to death, there's going to be, there's going to be some blood, but
I don't know. The last time I bludgeoned anybody to death,
it's been a while, I gotta say. Yeah. I'm just surprised that there's no, nothing. I know the blood isn't real, but you'd think there'd be something at least on the weapon. We don't even get any indication there was any blood on the weapon.
Yeah, I think there would probably be blood on the weapon. which is a secondary reason why later she throws it out for people to see. But I would think that given that she's hitting him on the head with that scepter, she's far enough back that she might not get splattered.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But I don't know. I haven't done that before. Maybe we should try it, see how it works. Anyway, and then with the full force of her anger, she swings the scepter one last time, bringing it crushing down on Spooner's head. She then moves to one of the windows, throws out the scepter through the window, shattering the glass and creating a noticeable disturbance, which, of course, captures the attention of the guards at the gate.
Yeah.
They step out to see what the ruckus is all about, just in time to see Jennifer, dressed as Atomic Man, climbing out the window of the second floor and onto a trellis on the side of the building. One of the guards hollers that that's that kook they just tossed out, and they take off running, leaving the guard shack and the entrance to the studio unguarded.
Of course.
A fireable offense, I'm sure. Anyway, Jennifer finishes climbing down the trellis, then runs off across the parking lot. She gets back to her office, enters through the French doors, and then steps to the side of the doors against the wall, ensuring that she isn't seen through the door as the security guards pass. Then, breathing heavily, she begins to remove the costume. We have a short time jump, and we see Hazel with Jennifer inside her office. Jennifer's having seemingly dumped a cup of coffee on her desk, and Hazel is with her, helping her clean up the spill. And behind, we see the closing credits to Atomic Man on the television.
Yeah, Hazel says it's not an issue because she was ahead of schedule anyway. How? You did nothing. You didn't even vacuum. You still got to vacuum.
Well, she was far enough ahead of schedule that she had a half hour at least to waste. So,
Yeah.
And it's easy when you skip offices.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm just not going to do that second floor tonight. They won't notice. They're a bunch of slobs anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, next we see that it's morning. Laura is in her loft cleaning up the breakfast dishes, and the television is on in the background, turned to the morning news show. Apparently, it's background noise for the morning chores. So Laura really isn't paying attention as the news reports.
It's funny. This is just a random observation, but I've noticed that as TV has changed, so too has how we use the TV, or at least how I use it. Because when I grew up in my house, it was just always on. You came home, it was on. You no matter what you were doing in the background, someone had the TV on, even if nobody was watching it, it was on. Because there were programming, and one episode of something ended, another thing came on. Now, because we don't have cable, we haven't had cable for probably since the early 2000s, 20 years. Everything's streaming services or whatever we have on our DVDs. The TV stays off unless we turn it on for something specific. It's never just on in the background.
Yeah.
So I find that kind of interesting.
Yeah. When I was growing up in our house, we didn't have the TV on all the time as background noise. As I got older, I think my mom did do that when she didn't have the radio on to a religious station, which she was never listening to, but it was just always on. And I know people who, like your family, the TV was just always on. It was just that background noise.
It's just there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I never did that. I always, if I had the TV on, it's because I wanted to watch something.
That's how it is now for me. But it's very different now than Yeah.
So anyway, Laura really isn't paying any attention as the news reports all Hollywood is saddened by the tragic death of Steven Spooner, who was murdered last night in the Studio City office. The 25-year-old director, 25, okay.
25.
He's a 25-year-old director, but they couldn't have a late 20s female producer. Yeah.
That's welcome to Hollywood.
Anyway, the 25-year-old director was preparing his latest film, Atomic Man, the movie. And at the mention of Atomic Man, Laura is suddenly paying attention.
Yep.
Her mouth drops open as the news report continues. Ironically, Max Donahue, the actor who portrayed Atomic Man on the television from 1961 to 1964, is being sought in connection with the crime. Well, Laura rushes out from her kitchen island to get a closer look at the television, then sits in stunned disbelief as the voice of James Jarvis carries forth from the television. Things are still kind of sketchy, but we have several eyewitnesses who claim they saw Mr. Donahue running from the scene of the crime. And of course, he did threaten to kill Mr. Spooner at a press conference earlier this week. So at the moment, he is our primary suspect, and we will probably issue a murder arrest warrant. Laura has grabbed a pillow and is holding it to her stomach, almost as a form of security.
Did you notice that behind her door is wide open?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. Yeah,
why is that not a surprise?
The whole scene from like when she's cleaning all the way to when she rushes over and sits down, the door is literally just wide. I know they've been broken into a lot, but come on. Like,
well, it's kind of that same mentality that people have. Some people have. Well, I'm not going to lock my car because if people are going to steal something, I don't want them to damage
get the window broken. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, she said, because Steele just runs in because the door's open. He doesn't open it. She doesn't open it. It's just open.
So anyway, as I say, she's holding this pillow to her stomach. Then she gets up, turns off the television, and then collapses into a chair. She is frozen, staring ahead, not even blinking as Steele comes bounding in with his obnoxiously cheerful, "Good morning," ready to take a magic carpet ride into the fascinating world of floor covering. And Laura doesn't seem to notice that he's there. And he's Persian, Chinese, Turkish. Laura doesn't respond. Yeah, I know. I said, watch it. She's like a living statue. And noticing the lack of response, Steele continues, thinking to stir her from her stupor. Perhaps your interest lies in domestic cuts. What would you say to a nice little American shag? Hello, nice little American shag.
This is hilarious for two reasons. I mean, one, his delivery. It's perfect. Like, hello, little American shag. But also the double entendre of a nice little American shag. I just, chef's kiss. It's perfect. And it wouldn't work in any other decade but the 80s because no one has shag carpets anymore. So, like, you can't even make the joke now and have it make any sense. It just wouldn't work. And I kind of wonder how the British censors would have, because British television is very different than American and Canadian television in the sense that they will heavily censor their TV up until the 9 p.m. watershed hour. And after that, anything goes, to the point where stuff that you would not expect to be allowed on cable would be allowed as long as it's after 9. Like, I remember being over there and watching Friends, and they censored the word ass. And like, because it was before 9 p.m. And I was like, really, guys? I mean, okay, whatever. This, I assume, would not pass muster. I'm guessing it would have been censored. And it also makes me think of, there's a scene, sorry about this, there's a Buffy scene where it's in season 4. Spike is tied up. He's a character, he's a vampire, he's British, he's very rude, he's very sort of inappropriate at all times, and he's tied up, and one of the characters, they've lost their voice. It's an episode where they lost their voice, and one of the characters wakes up and he looks over at Spike, who's tied up, and he points at him and basically says, "You did this," or mouths it to him. And Spike, realizing he can't speak, does this gesture. Not this one, this, which in Britain, and for those of you who can't see me, it's 2 fingers up in sort of the reverse peace sign, which is a very rude gesture.
Yeah, look for a photo of Winston Churchill giving the so-called V symbol. Yeah, it's the backwards V. Yeah, and it's
which is considered a very rude gesture and caused some issues when the episode aired over there. So I'm thinking that his nice little American shag joke probably didn't go over well across the pond.
I mean, 2 things about it. First of all, I'm not sure how recognized the joke would have been in the States in the 1980s. Some people, I'm sure, would have gotten it, but I'm not sure everybody would have.
No, I'm not saying it would have been censored in the States.
Well, no, I'm getting to that.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And in Britain, it might have gotten passed because of the context. Because the context is he's talking about shag carpet.
Sure he is.
Well, that's ostensibly the context, so it's depending on who was doing the censoring that day, it might have slipped past and says, okay, well, he's talking about carpet. Yeah. Well, yeah. Double entendre, but yeah.
Now you're wading into some iffy waters here.
Yeah. So anyway.
It's my favorite joke. It's legitimately my favorite joke. Hello, nice little American shag.
Anyway, Laura slowly turns her head towards Steele, and come to think of it, I wonder how much input he had on that joke. Anyway, Laura turns.
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Laura turns her head towards Steele slowly, and still in an apparent state of shock, and with a look of distress on her face. And in her voice, she says that Atomic Man is wanted for murder. And Steele expresses faux shock and dismay. He never realized that the penalty for bad acting was that stiff in this country.
Ouch.
He smiles and gives a little chuckle, thinking he's bringing a little bit of needed levity and sanity to what appears to be a case of Laura being overwrought in a silly plot development in a third-rate television show. But no, it's a real murder, and the real police are after him. And he's innocent. He's being hunted down like an animal. And puzzled, Steele asks, well, how does she know he's innocent? And Laura's surprised. I mean, how could he be so out of touch, so lacking in comprehension? After all, Atomic Man could never hurt anyone.
This is, boy, if this doesn't say, it's funny, this episode came out almost 40 years ago. And if this doesn't say so much about where we are as a society when it comes to parasocial relationships with celebrities, I don't know what does. Because we have gotten to a point, and social media has made it infinitely worse, where we feel we know these people. We don't know these people, but we feel we know these people. So when something comes out about these people that is less than complimentary, whether it's true or not, you'll have one side that will be quick to sort of vilify, condemn, and blame, and then another side that will be like, well, no, this is my hero, this actor couldn't have done this. This actor would never do this. He was in a show, he or she was in a show where they played a good person. So clearly they're good people because, they played a good person. Like, it just, it baffles me how we can be so blinded towards that when we don't know these people. These are human beings that are...
Well, part of it has to do with, in some cases, how to put it, there are some people who cannot see, I suppose intellectually on some level, they understand it's a TV show and these people are just actors, but at some other level, they actually buy into what they're seeing as being real life in some way. The Dick Van Dyke Show, Dick Van Dyke, Mary Tyler Moore, when they left, when that show was over and Mary Tyler Moore went on to her show, which was appropriately called the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Yeah.
There were people that were shocked. What, she divorced Robert Petrie? What? How could she? They were such a perfect couple. They actually thought that Mary Tyler Moore, Laura Petrie, and Dick Van Dyke, Rob Petrie, were married. And it's just...
Yeah, this happens to this day. Like, if you look at the TV show Outlander, the two actors that play the couple in the series are married to different people. Or she's married, I think he's engaged, I don't know. But there is a huge faction of the show's fan base that quote-unquote ships them as people. And I find it very creepy, personally. Like, I find it quite to equate chemistry on screen with, they're good together on screen. They should be good. They should be together in real life. It just, there's something about that that's just, I don't know. Like, I don't want to. I mean, would I mind meeting a celebrity I admire and getting an autograph? No, I've got a whole wall of autographs. Do I assume that I know these people because I had a 5-minute interaction with them and it was pleasant? Absolutely not.
Well, and like you said, it continues on into current day. For example, on the TV series Bones, there were a lot of people who thought that the I am really having brain farts today. No, on Bones.
Bones, right, okay.
The guy who played Angela's father.
ZZ Top
Billy
guy.
Gibbons.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who actually thought that he was Michaelia Conlin's real dad. Michaelia Conlin being the actress who played Angela Montenegro, because that's how it was presented as, he's my dad, he's famous, blah, blah, blah. And so they just assumed that. But then even the actors themselves kind of confuse things, because in the show, Angela and Jack Hodgins got married.
Yeah.
Well, in real life, the actress who played Angela and the actor who played Jack Hodgins got married.
Oh, I didn't know that. Huh.
For a few years. Yeah. So, I mean,
sometimes that happens, right? Like sometimes you'll have two actors that meet and they
yeah. Usually, so I mean, even the actors sometimes believe their own hype.
Yeah. Well, or if you think about it, you're working closely with somebody for a long period of time, and in a setting where you're occasionally expected to be romantic, even if it's simulated with each other. It's probably not very romantic when there's cameras in your face, but it's not surprising that might happen. It's also not surprising that those usually don't last. Those are the relationships that usually don't.
And that's one of my theories as to why so many Hollywood couples break up, is because they marry someone, but then they're portraying this character on a TV show or in a movie with this other person who they're not married to, and their character feelings get mixed up with their own real feelings, and they suddenly imagine that they're actually in love with this person, and it
probably messes with your head.
So they leave the person that they're actually married to or having a relationship with and go for this other person, and then it turns out, we were just acting, weren't we? Sorry, my bad.
You gotta think it probably messes with your head to some degree when you're that deep into a character or into a series, especially if it's TV, right? Like you're portraying this person not just once in a movie, but like for a prolonged period of time. Yeah. So I don't know. I can see where Laura's coming from in that this is her hero.
Yeah. But Steele is not interested in reinforcing and legitimizing Laura's childhood fantasies and her adult delusions. And so he tells her that regardless of how important Atomic Man was to her in her formative years, she has to remember that he's still just an actor in a silly suit.
He could be a little more gentle about this. He can clearly see from the earlier scene and from her expression now, like she looks at him like he's just kicked the puppy. Yeah. Right. He can obviously see that this is something that matters to her and is important, even if he thinks it's silly. Come on, dude. Like,
well, yeah. I mean, you can see she's not pleased. She looks him daggers in the eye, and then angrily turns her head away, refuses to dignify such a callous cad by even giving him the courtesy of a looking at him. So Steele gets stern, trying to simultaneously snap her out of her retreat from reality, as well as remind her of her responsibilities and obligations. She points out that it was she who promised Mooney that they'd be there to meet him early enough so as not to interfere with his live television commercials.
Infomercials.
No, live television commercials.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
30-second, 60-second spots. They used to do live television commercials back in the day. Not in the 80s so much, but yeah. Oh, that reminds me. Used to be, you could buy these records and videotapes of TV bloopers. This is back before the America's Best TV Bloopers or whatever. It was a series. And I remember one where I just saw it on the commercial, and there was this guy. You didn't actually see him on the screen. You just heard him talking. And there was a live commercial for bread, and they had an actress there slicing bread and passing out samples. And unfortunately, her top was buttoned a little bit too low.
It was a wardrobe malfunction?
No, it was a mouth malfunction. And it was the he's supposed to say the best bread.
Oh no! Oh no! I know where this is going.
The breast bed.
Oh, no. Whoops.
and then you hear him say, "Sorry, folks, I knew that was going to happen."
That's funny.
So anyway, yes, not to interfere with the live television commercials. Laura's eyes pop open, realizing that she's got the answer. She tells Steele he's right. And she hops up and runs across the room to a chest sitting beside the stairs to her sleeping area. Well, Steele's puzzled. He's right. Well, clearly he's not sure what she means or what has suddenly gotten into her. Well, Laura opens the top of the chest and begins digging around, telling Steele that poor man needs our help. He's alone, frightened, and says he can't get to them. They'll have to get to him. At the bottom of the chest, she finds the object of her search, her cherished Atomic Man ring. She snatches it up and heads toward the door, snagging her purse on the way. Yes?
I just think it's cute. I think it's cute that she's got her little ring and that she's, I love that she's got a fandom and that it's something that Steele has never heard about before. And we see that later when she's at the convention, which I have some issues with the convention. We'll get to that. But
yeah. Anyway, so Steele hops up and follows, uncertain if she's talking about the Carpet King or what exactly she's talking about. Now, as they're leaving, Laura/Stephanie reaches over to that brick pony wall that's to the side of the entry door.
Right.
And sets something on the ledge. I mean, we can hear it clank as she sets it down.
Yeah, I noticed that.
I don't know what it is because other than the ring that she picked up and her purse, I don't see anything in her hand that she would be putting down and that would be making that kind of a noise. So if anybody knows.
Maybe it's her loft keys. She just finally decided she doesn't need them anymore.
I just leave them here for somebody.
We're not, exactly. Might as well just leave them there.
Yeah. Well, next we are at Mooney's. Laura and Steele are walking through the sales floor, and racks fill the aisles, carpet samples, squares hanging from them, stacks more on top of the carpet squares on top of the racks. Next to the aisles are rolls of carpet stacked head high and higher. And as Steele walks along looking at the rolls of carpet, Laura suddenly bolts off, but Steele doesn't notice. Mooney comes up, grabs Steele's hands, and they begin to shake and asks about Laura's whereabouts. And it's only then that Steele realizes that she's taken off, and Steele vamps, saying that she's no doubt working on the security system. And for Mooney, getting that security system installed can't happen too fast. He tells Steele that in the last week, he's had enough indoor-outdoor stolen from this store alone to blanket the Astrodome, and he's got 19 outlets.
Okay. There was a carpet theft ring? Like, who? Why? Just why?
I don't know. I don't know.
This part, I get. Why? Why would you be like, if you're a thief, if you're burgling is your profession, you're a professional burglar. Okay, tonight we're doing carpets. Now we gotta hit Mooney's. We what?
Apparently the street value on stolen carpets is quite good.
Well, sure, but you gotta lug them all over the place like that. It's not exactly small merchandise. I don't know. I would go for, I don't know, jewelry, the classics, not the large.
Well, on the other hand, think about it. Jewelry stores are usually heavily guarded, armed with alarms. I mean, who's going to steal carpet, right? So we don't need a security system.
Bullets open a carpet store. He's sending people to get inventory. I'm just saying.
Anyway, Mooney looks at his watch and excuses himself, telling Steele he's got a commercial to do.
Or she does.
Mooney and Steele walk toward the aisle, which is set up for the commercial. And there are lights and cameras and several people busily getting ready for the commercial. Mooney steps in front of the camera and gets a cue. A woman holds up cards for Mooney, who begins to read them for the camera. And the commercial is going along fine until he gets to the third and then the fourth card, which contain nonsensical words.
Yeah.
Mooney is perplexed, has no idea what's going on or even what he's reading. In the meantime, a sly grin crosses Laura's face, and Steele gives her a disapproving sideways look, realizing that Laura, for some heretofore unexplained reason, and possibly unexplainable reason, was behind the nonsense. I like the script version better. In the script version, which is dated 2 months before the episode aired, so
right.
it's gone through some rewrites.
Okay.
There's no one holding cue cards. Mooney is doing the commercial off the cuff, and Laura wanders into the scene. And Mooney, improvising at the unexpected intrusion, treats the situation as if a customer has inadvertently wandered in. So he introduces her as another satisfied customer, asking her why she shops at Mooney's Carpets. At which point, Laura replies, Lifkin, Schlott, Grubb, Flit, Millman, Glim. Now, that makes more sense than what was shot, because that would be something Laura would say to get a hold of Max. Mooney, he would look at the cards and say, "What? Wait, what?"
Or any normal human,
or he would just improvise.
Yeah, any normal human wouldn't just read whatever was in front of him if it made no sense. However, I can sort of see why Laura would not want to be the one delivering the message, because it then puts the agency first, like, out there as, if you can put two and two together, which Jarvis eventually does, that she's sending a message to a wanted felon, like, come and help me out, or contact me and I'll help you. And then later on, when Jarvis does see them, initially he doesn't think that they are there to grab Max or to help Max or whatever. It's only when he sees her sneaking out with Max that he kind of clues in. But if he hadn't seen that, it would have protected their identity as helping Max. So I can sort of see why she would want someone else delivering the message.
What's the chances that Jarvis would see that commercial and make the connection? About the same as Max seeing that commercial and making the connection.
Well, okay, fair enough. But then we have to suspend disbelief entirely and assume that everyone saw that commercial, because obviously Max does contact her. So,
so anyway, back in the office, Mildred looks on as Steele chastises Laura, telling her that she's not only reverted to childhood, she's practically returned to the womb, which he has no business taking her to task about any of this, because first of all, it's her agency, not his. And second of all, you don't do that sort of thing in front of other people.
Well, and not just even that, but sorry.
No, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, even if you do own the business, even if you are the manager of the business, whatever it is, you don't discipline an employee in front of other people. You take them into unless you need them there as a witness because of possible sexual harassment issue claims later on, or because you need a witness to verify that, yes, I told this person this thing. You don't do it in front of other people. That's totally out of line. I
totally agree on that sense. On the other hand, he's stripped down in front of Mildred. So at this point, all professional propriety is kind of gone out the window.
This doesn't have anything to do with him, though. This has to do with Laura.
No, I get it. But in addition to that, how many cases has he chased after because they resembled a movie, or because he just had a hunch the person was innocent because he happened to like Veronica Kirk, right? He was a fan of her movies, so therefore he believed whatever she told him, regardless of whether or not there was any evidence to back it up. So, hello, hypocrite, party of one. Like, it just, it's pretty rich coming from him that he would. Now, putting that aside, the fact that he's technically right in the sense that she's going off on this tangent with no evidence that there's that Max is innocent, right? But again, in that he knows A, how much this means to her, and B, you're right, he's in front of Mildred, and C, he's done this too. You don't have a leg to stand on when you've done it too. Like, you just don't.
Laura does bring that up later in the episode, which is why I didn't bother to mention it here. But yes.
Like, he could have handled this a lot differently, saying something along, like, I realize this is important to you. I understand that this show meant a lot to you. I want to help, but we don't have any evidence. What is your plan? Like, trying to be let in instead of, like, shutting the door completely on it and saying, well, you're just being a child. You've regressed so far, you're in the womb. Like, what? Okay, that's going to work, right? Like, she's really going to listen.
Yeah. Anyway, Laura does try to defend and explain herself, not that she needs to, by saying that she had to let Max know that she wanted to help. And it seemed that television was the best medium for the message. And of course, Steele doesn't understand how Lifkin Schlott Grob is a message. Well, of course it is. With the Atomic Man decoder ring, the phone rings. Mildred reaches to answer it. Laura, who's been sitting on the furniture along the wall behind Mildred's desks. Have we ever seen a row of wooden filing cabinets back there before? I don't remember.
I don't recall it.
Yeah. Anyway, she jumps down and rushes over to the yanks the phone out of Mildred's hand. And when the caller asks for Mildred, Laura curtly replies, "No, she's not here," then hangs up the phone.
Mildred takes hour-long lunches. She's just like, you know what? Peace out. I'm gone.
Mildred lets out a protest, but she is cut off by Steele, asking why Laura thinks that the man is going to call, rationally pointing out, as I said before, that the chances of him having seen the commercial are...
Yeah.
And the phone cuts Steele off. Mildred grabs it before Laura, who lets out with a protest. And this time, Steele snatches it from Mildred's hands. And Laura pouts, saying that, well, maybe she should just try to go do some filing. Well, Steele's on the phone. Answers, "Steele here." He pauses and frowns and then repeats. Zip, glimp, bow, blue, blur. The disgusted look, he hands the phone to Laura and says, "It's for you." Laura grabs the phone. It is, of course, Max Donahue. She introduces herself and assures him that she believes he is innocent and wants to help, asking where they can meet. Off to the side, Steele's expression is of concern about Laura. Yeah. And he says to Mildred, after all, she's usually the logical one, everything by the book, allowing precious little time for emotions to creep in and cloud her judgments. Now look at her, trading blinks and blurgs with a homicidal actor.
It's almost as if he's jealous of the fact that she believes in Max beyond reason. It's like he's transferring his own frustration that she's not able to emotionally invest herself in him to this, which is a little bit of a stretch, right? Like it's thin.
Yeah. Yeah, he's definitely not behaving maturely.
I could understand if he was concerned about the fact that Max could be a killer. And again, if that's the case, then you offer to go with her because that's what partners do. Instead, he's like, look at this. She believes he's innocent. She holds out on me, but she believes this guy's innocent. He could be a homicide. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Everything that she's ever said to him, he's starting to repeat back to her. Don't you just hate it when somebody repeats your word back to you? And
right.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. Steele grabs Laura, demanding to know where. Laura hangs up the phone, grabs her purse, and starts heading toward the door. Steele grabs her, demands to know where she's going, and she says to meet Max, of course. Dismayed, Steele insists that the man is dangerous. After all, he's already wanted by the police for murder. Laura is suddenly looking past Steele, focusing on some unseen point, and she blurts out, "The fugitive." Steele, not understanding, reiterates, "Yes, the fugitive, Maxwell Donahue." "No," Laura corrects, "the fugitive, David Jansen, a Quinn Martin production, 1963 to 1967.
Which is funny because I immediately thought of the movie and then realized the movie came out after this episode. Yeah.
Steele moves his lips in silent confusion and then turns to Mildred and asks, "Mildred, you're an American. What's she talking about?" Now, granted, many American TV shows did not make it to the United Kingdom, and I couldn't find out any details about when or if The Fugitive ever aired in the UK. But, I mean, come on, doesn't Steele at least know a little bit about the television series? I mean, maybe heard of it or something?
Honestly, this tracks for me because my husband grew up in Scotland, and you wouldn't believe the amount of stuff that I will reference that he will just be completely oblivious to. Had never heard of it, doesn't know what I'm talking about, and it baffles me sometimes because I'm like, were you under a rock? But like, it really just, there's a lot of stuff that just did not air there, or that they didn't have any access to, or had never heard of, or what have you. Like, I'll talk about some sitcoms that were huge, like Full House, for example. And he'll be like, I've kind of heard of it, but he won't know anything about it. So to me, this makes perfect sense because this is pre-internet, and if it didn't air over there, they don't know about it. Yeah.
Well, Mildred rather unhelpfully supplies that, that was an old television series. Laura provides a bit more detail, explaining that David Jansen played a man running from the police for a murder he didn't commit. He'd been framed. Steele is astounded, shocked,
the one-armed
dismayed. Man. That's what you're basing his innocence on? A television show?
Hypocrite, party for one.
Laura crosses her arms and gives him a disapproving scowl, asking how many times she's followed him blindly just because one of their cases bore a faint resemblance to the plot of some silly movie. Well,
if she's allowed to play the card at any point, it's here.
Yeah. Steele is cornered. He realizes it. He sighs and gives in.
Yep.
And as they walk to the door, Laura gives Mildred a triumphant grin. And as they start to walk out, Steele stops and asks, just where does one find an atomic man? Well, next we see a banner hanging from the front of a convention center, which reads 20th Annual Atomic Man Convention. Mm-hmm. Which leads me to my question here. If there's anybody out there listening that knows about a convention that includes Remington Steele fans and or Remington Steele dealers or includes Remington Steele in some way, drop me a line. I've got an idea. I
was thinking I was thinking about what you said, and it's hard because unless you've got...
That's what she said.
Unless you've got like unless you've got a table where you're actually selling merch.
Yeah.
And I've never seen it, frankly.
Yeah.
But
somebody might have somewhere.
I have, because I've been to a lot of conventions, and I have had my Remington Steele sweater noticed when I'm there at, like, going past the tables. A couple of people have commented and gone, oh, Remington Steele, I love that show. So it's not like it's unheard of. It's just, yeah.
Well, if anybody knows of anything that includes Remington Steele as part of the agenda or market area,
we should totally do our own. SteeleWatching convention. We should do our own. Just saying.
Inside, we see a convention crowd.
Mm-hmm. Sort of.
Yeah. Hopefully, this is just some isolated corner, like away from the main convention and vendors area, because if this is it, if this is the main part of the convention, I'm not seeing much of the vaunted popularity of Atomic Man.
To be fair, if it was a smaller show with a smaller fan base, I could sort of see that this, because conventions didn't really explode the way that they have now until I want to say the early to mid 2000s. I've been to some conventions pre like Comic-Con explosion and post, and it's a whole different ballgame now. So that part doesn't strike me as off, especially if it wasn't like a huge, because it ran for 3 seasons.
Yeah, well, Star Trek had some pretty big conventions going on by this time.
Well, yeah, but they also had they had revived the series to make the movies.
Not at this. They had at this point. Yeah, that's true.
So, there was some hype associated with it, and if you keep in mind, Star Trek's a bit of an odd case because they canceled that show, and fan response was so vehement
that they brought it back for the third season,
which had almost been unheard of. And Star Trek is sort of responsible for starting or for sort of putting fan fiction out there as like a mainstream thing that people were doing in zines and stuff like that. So it's, I don't get the sense that Atomic Man had the same following from the show.
Yeah, probably not.
But the issue that I have with it isn't that. Laura says to Steele, they call themselves Tommies and that a few times a year they get together. Yet the sign says it's an annual convention.
Well, maybe not just this one convention. There may be other conventions that she's referring to.
Yeah, I was a little confused by that because then when the one guy bumps into her and comments on how she doesn't have her costume this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm thinking that she's just meaning in the same sense that Star Trek fans in the early 70s, mid 70s would have referenced. This convention is an annual convention, but there's 3 other conventions that we go to. And so fans get together several times a year. So yeah, I can see how
it's also unusual for a convention to focus on, and this might be something that was again more common back then than now. Now most conventions focus on multiple fandoms because that's what brings people in. I've only ever been to or heard of, back when I started going to conventions, I was 19, so that we're looking at like early 2000s, right? 2001, that most conventions were multiple fandoms. Now, I started going to a convention called Toronto Trek that did start out exclusively as a Star Trek convention, but by the time I started going to it, it had already branched out and was doing other fandoms as well. There was one Buffy convention I knew of at the time, and there are some, again, even now, there's a Buffy convention that happens in California, but that's close to where the show was shot, kind of thing. It's less common now to get a convention dedicated to one series because you've got to make sure you've got enough money to pay actors to show up, and you're not going to get as many people show up if it's only that one fan base. So,
yeah, the early Trek conventions were strictly Trek, but yeah, I think most of them, like you say, have expanded out, and they either they expanded out or they got absorbed into other conventions. So that they were the
well, it's the difference between a fan-run convention and a corporation professional convention, because a lot of these conventions started out as fan-run, so they weren't there to make a profit. They were there to just get people together to, be fans of a show. But then you've got Creation and a couple of these other companies that basically went, hey, we can make a lot of money off of autographs and whatnot and merch and etc. So now it's kind of to the point where, I'll go. There's a couple that happen in my city every year, and there's a few in Toronto, and there's one in Niagara Falls I might have to force myself to go to because Robert Englund, who plays Freddy Krueger, is going to be there. But like, it's mainly just a trade show now where you spend a ton of money and there's not a lot of fan interaction because all the social stuff has kind of gone.
Yeah.
But
and everything, including the autographs, is all about money.
Oh my God, they're so expensive now. You have to pay money
to get an autograph for somebody.
So expensive now.
So anyway, as you said, Laura explains about them being called Tommies, that they get together a few times. And as you said, one of the other convention goers bumps into her and comments about her not having a costume. And as the man walks off, Steele teases Laura, saying that he's sure that she looks positively fetching in her little cape and booties.
I'm sorry. There is a fan fiction there, right? It may be NC-17 rated, but there is a fan fiction there where she wears that costume for him. I'm just saying.
Anyway, Laura deflects, saying that they need to find Max, not indulge Steele's fantasy of Laura engaging in role play.
I'm just saying.
Are you sure you can keep it to NC-17? Anyway,
no, I can't.
Steele wonders how they can be expected to find one specific guy dressed up as Atomic Man in a sea of duplicates. And here is where that original version of the commercial scene really makes more sense. Well, Laura's attention is caught as she tells Steele that they don't have to find him. He's found us. How? How did he know to recognize Laura? In the original draft, the script of that commercial scene, he would have seen her on the screen and recognized her at the convention. As it is now, how does he know?
I have two questions. That was one of them. The other one is that if this isn't the annual Atomic Man convention, why wasn't he invited? I mean, I get that he would have had to cancel because of the whole murder accusation, but why wasn't he invited as a guest? You would think.
Not all the actors for all shows are invited as guests to conventions. Well,
usually if it's this is a smaller convention, clearly, and it's an annual thing, and the show was obviously or probably shot there. My guess is he should probably be a regular, because usually if you're doing this type of thing, especially if it's your 20th annual, that's an anniversary. You want the top guy, and it's not like it doesn't look like he's in high demand elsewhere. So it probably wouldn't have cost a ton of money to get him. So I just think it odd that they didn't even because if they could have included something in the script about how he was supposed to be there but had to cancel, it would kind of make sense if she sent a message that said something like convention brown suit or something that kind of described what she was wearing, and that's why he shows up. As it is, it looks like all they've got is his sidekick as their guest that year, which eesh, like that's not good. That's not good. That's not good.
Well, we have an actor here. We don't know who they are, but they wore a red shirt.
Yeah. Like if it's a 20th anniversary, even if Laura said like he was supposed to be here, but obviously he had to cancel or something like that, it would to me it seems rather odd that you have the 20th annual convention and he wasn't invited as a guest.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Laura, after her comment to Steele, raises her fist and begins flashing signals with her decoder ring. And we see Donahue hiding behind a poster, responding with his decoder ring.
You'd think you'd have like 20 other fans doing the same, though.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
well, maybe most of them don't have a decoder ring anymore or never got it. They didn't buy enough box tops or something.
They'll have one. They will have one. They will have a decoder ring and they will have the underwear and everything else. So.
Anyway, Laura and Steele walk over to Donahue, whereupon Laura and Donahue greet each other in what must be the accepted traditional manner of greeting amongst the strange alien peoples. Yeah. Index finger and thumb to index finger and thumb, gradually spreading them apart to form a tall, narrow diamond. Laura is positively giddy, introducing Steele as her boss. Probably the only time I can think of where she didn't choke on it while saying,
yeah, exactly.
He's her boss.
She's just so happy to meet him.
And gushing that he's a very famous private detective and he wants to help very much.
Also, again, sorry, I'm harping on this convention thing, but that implies he's never been there as a guest.
Yeah.
Because if she's never met him before and she goes to these conventions enough that people are recognizing her and asking what her costume is, what?
That's true.
How has she never met this man? Where is the autograph wall? I'm sorry, I call bullcrap.
Well,
anyway.
Steele snarkily says that Laura has convinced him that Donahue is the David Jansen of their time.
That's a funny line, only because my mom had a massive crush on him.
Okay.
I don't know. I can't explain it either. Like I've looked him up. Yeah.
Well, Donahue, not seemingly to take the situation as seriously as maybe he should, joyfully thanks them for believing in him. And no, he wasn't followed. Sure, a couple of cops chased him, but he shook them off. He chuckles that he's still pretty fast on his feet. Does a little jogging and workout, because the costume shows every bulge and ripple. And looking out over the crowd.
Yeah, Steele, so he must be wearing it, which means he must be attending conventions. Sorry. Otherwise, he's just wearing it in his house? Going to the grocery store in it? Like, what is this? What are you doing with it if not wearing it out in public?
Anyway, yes, he wears it around home, pretending. Looking out over the crowd, Steele expresses concern that maybe Donahue might not have been fast enough, and he directs Laura to have a look. It's Jarvis. He's apparently come in the back way, figuring to catch his quarry unawares. Steele directs Laura and Donahue to slip out the front door while he occupies the Huckleberry Hound of Homicide. Huckleberry Finn.
That's a good line for Jarvis. A good way to describe him.
Well, Steele rushes over and loudly, and with much fanfare, greets Jarvis. Jarvis, apparently momentarily not placing him, suddenly recognizes Steele and with some excitement says, "I haven't seen you since." And of course, Steele can't pass up the opportunity to embarrass Jarvis by reminding him that the last time Jarvis saw him was when he had hounded Steele for a murder he hadn't committed.
Didn't they see him in Elegy, though? I thought, or at least I thought it was off screen, but I thought that they had, because the Major shows up in the office.
Yeah. Well, that's what he's talking about here. Well, yeah.
No, because at that point they were exonerated from before, because it was Steele framed was when Jarvis comes out after him, but Elegy, the Major shows up again in the office and they call Jarvis.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So that would have been the last time they saw him. Even if it wasn't on screen, they definitely talked to him because it's mentioned, like his name gets mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, Jarvis, obviously remembering as he turns away crestfallen at being discourteously greeted and belittled.
Yeah.
Then Steele leans over and conspiratorial asks Jarvis, "Are you a Tommy too?" And Jarvis stumbles around
Steele in the outfit now.
Steele jumbles around his. I'm sorry, I just had a flash of Batgirl from Batman 66. Anyway, I don't know why my mind went there. Jarvis stumbles around his thoughts and then says, "No, he's there working on a case." Steele says, "Oh, that is fascinating," and asks Jarvis to tell him all about it. Jarvis, looking around, spots something of interest, then asks Steele, "Isn't that Miss Holt?" Steele responds, No. Then looking around, he sees a banner which reads, "Meet Atomic Man's sidekick, Jimmy Jones." Jarvis insists that is Miss Holt, and he thinks she has something he's after. Well, determined to stop Jarvis and give Laura and Donahue time to make their escape, Steele starts calling out to the crowd, "Hey, look, everybody, it's Jimmy Jones! Jimmy Jones right here!" And Jarvis is suddenly mobbed by fans wanting an autograph.
I have issues with this.
Or some other piece of it, and go ahead with your issues.
This is my last nitpick on the convention. Clearly, the writers of this episode have never been to a fan convention. First of all, there's no way Jarvis would have been old enough to have played a character from a show that was on in the 60s. Even if he was, the fans would know what he looks like. I'm sorry, but they would know what he looks like. If you're like, come on, that'd be like, "Hey, everybody, it's William Shatner," and then being mobbing some random 20-year-old. Jarvis is what, late 20s, early 30s?
I'm going to say he's probably in his mid 30s. He looks a lot younger than he is.
I mean, either like he's not old enough, and they'd know what he looks like. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't, people would look maybe, but he wouldn't get mobbed by adoring fans. They'd look over and they'd be like, "Where? I don't see him."
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like it was a radio show. It was TV.
Yeah. Well, then we're back at Laura's loft, where she's apparently doing some house cleaning as we see her wiping a glass bowl with a towel. There is an insistent and persistent beating on the door. Calling out, "I'm coming," she walks to the door and opens it. Jarvis runs in, looking around. Laura greets him, saying, "What a surprise." And he wants Maxwell Donahue. "He's innocent," Laura insists, and Jarvis... Why do I have Davis? Jarvis recounts that he threatened to kill Steven Spooner and he was spotted leaving the scene of the crime. "Circumstantial," Laura again waves a dismissively comment toward him. "His fingerprints were on the murder weapon," Jarvis tells her. Laura is slightly taken aback at this new information. And then Jarvis continues, telling her that she'd better get him to the nearest police station as quickly as possible. Otherwise, she'll be looking at a few charges herself. Well, Laura indignantly challenges him, asking what is it he thinks he could charge her with.
And she should know
really,
these.
Laura?
She should know this.
You know good and well you are out there on thin legal ice. So anyway, Jarvis begins cutting the ice underneath her, says obstructing justice, aiding and abetting a fugitive, accessory after the fact. How does that sound so far? Sounds pretty good so far, she says, right? Not wanting to admit defeat, but, she admits it's impressive. Well, Jarvis finishes out by reminding her that she's got a nice place, light and airy, a lot more spacious than a jail cell.
Yep. Although I would just like to point out, I looked it up and you are correct. He is 35, but still, he doesn't look it.
That's how he can get away with the Huck Finn routine. It's because he doesn't look it. But
again, if the show had been on in 66, unless Jimmy Jones was a child.
Yes.
And even still, they'd know what he looks like. Anyway, sorry, I'm done. I'm done for real.
Well, next we're at Steele's apartment, and he and Mildred are questioning Donahue. Steele asks if there's any way Donahue can prove that Spooner wanted to see him in costume at precisely 10:30 the previous night. No, like he said, his secretary called around 9:30. Mildred says that the secretary says that she went home at 6 and her time card backs her up. Donahue insists that somebody called him. Steele observes that it doesn't look good so far. Donahue says that, it might look worse than it does right now once he tells him the next part. Now, Steele scowls. Donahue hesitantly says that, the murder weapon, it may just have his fingerprints on it. Steele says he doesn't understand how that could be. Donahue says it was a prop from the original show. When he read that Spooner was going to do the movie version, Donahue sent it to him as his way of reminding him that Donahue was Atomic Man. And Steele's frustrated, saying that the more Donahue explains, the worse it gets.
I mean, that's still kind of circumstantial, though, because if he were detained and explained to the police, well, yeah, I sent it to him. It's my fingerprints. Like, there's still no proof. Like, that's all he was seen. He showed up there. Like, I don't know. To me doesn't spell concrete.
No, but there's been a lot of people convicted and worse on circumstantial evidence.
True.
So
that's true.
Anyway, Donahue pleads with Steele to believe him. He's not a murderer. He's just an actor who wants to act. And here's where he comes into that thing that you'd mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
He admits that Atomic Man was probably the best and worst thing that ever happened to him. As a struggling actor, it was great. The money was good, put food on the table, sent a couple of nieces through college. But then the series got canceled and he couldn't get arrested. Well, that's changed now. It didn't seem to matter to anybody that he'd played Hamlet. He played Tartuffe, won rave reviews from the San Francisco Theater Guild. No, he was Atomic Man, and nobody thought that he could play anything else. But in the long run, it really didn't seem to matter because everywhere he went, people still thought of him as a hero, and he liked that. And as they listen, Mildred and Steele's feelings toward Donahue soften, although the situation does still on the surface seem hopeless, with everything seemingly pointing to his guilt.
And this is, again, not pointing at one specific actor, but definitely the show does this a lot. It will take a real life situation and sort of make it into a metaphor. And this is pretty much every major character part that you get associated with. Like, and again, normally genre stuff, but if you look at Star Trek, if you look at even James Bond to an extent, like Superman, I mean, Chris Reeve, when you think of Superman, that's the face you think of, right? But when it comes to genre television, especially, like, if you make your name for yourself on a TV show, TV at the time was considered to be sort of inferior to film. That almost limits your chances of ever making the jump to films because people have cemented you in their minds in a certain way. And I've mentioned it before, but Will Wheaton, his memoir, Still Just a Geek, he talks about how when he left Star Trek because he was frustrated that his character was sort of universally reviled by most people, that he was being put into teen magazines as a pinup, but he wasn't really getting any decent scripts, and that he wanted to do movies, and he had done a couple of movies, but Paramount was holding him back because he had been offered these parts, but he couldn't take them. And there was one particular situation where he was offered a film and he wanted to take it, and he asked Paramount, this was going into one of the seasons, can you let me out for a couple of episodes so I can film this movie? And Paramount had said to him initially that there was no major storylines for his character, and then they changed their mind and said, oh yeah, no, Wesley's an integral part, so you need to be here. And then it turned out he wasn't even in those episodes. So they kind of screwed him out of it. So he walked away from Star Trek wanting to make this big name for himself, and nobody would hire him.
Well, worse, I don't think it was a studio executive. If I remember correctly, it was
Rick Berman. He was the head of
Berman or Braga. Yeah, one of the producers of the show.
Yeah, it was Berman.
Did that and told him that, no, you've got to be here because you're going to be in these scripts. You're a pivotal character, and then nothing. Yeah. And so it was spite.
Yeah, it was total spite, because Berman was also the one who left him out initially when they did their anniversary thing where they called all the cast members on the stage, and cut him out of Nemesis when he came back to film. There was one scene where he's in at the wedding for Troy, and so he had a lot of complicated feelings about Star Trek because he walked away, and by that point he was kind of in that awkward stage of like late teens, early 20s, and he wasn't River Phoenix or Leonardo DiCaprio or any of these sort of teen heartthrobs that were getting these more edgier parts. And Hollywood just sort of forgot him, and he fought for a long time it wasn't until he got on The Big Bang Theory and started doing other stuff, but he had to really come to a point where he embraced Wesley and Star Trek in general, because it kind of tanked his career in a way.
And it was all he had left.
Yeah, and a lot of these actors, like, that's, I mean, if Galaxy Quest, that's kind of what it's making fun of in such a loving way. But, you know, and you feel for Max, and Steele starts to feel for Max, because Max articulates this in far less words than I just did, how important it is to be thought of positively when he's got nothing else left. His career's not going anywhere, but people still see him as a hero. Yeah,
it's the last thing he's got. Don't take it away from me.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, as you said, when Max finishes his speech, Mildred is looking upon him with sympathy. Steele is with understanding, because each of them has been there. Mildred had been a bureaucrat with no one could imagine doing a private investigator job. And Steele, of course, is the recipient of adulation and hero worship for a role he played or plays. So, yeah, they both can kind of sympathize, I think. Steele acknowledges that the hero worship can be addicting, even though it's merely for portraying a hero.
Yeah, in Steele's case, his empathizing is a little bit more on the nose, because both of them are receiving this adoration that's kind of unearned, whereas Mildred's actually at least doing the work, you know?
Yeah. Well, Donahue concludes his plea to Steele by saying, well, don't you see, if I kill someone, I lose the only thing I have left for my career, my reputation. You understand that. You're a hero, the amazing sleuth who's never been stumped. Of course, the only difference between us is that you really are Remington Steele, and I'm just an actor playing a part. What he doesn't know. What he doesn't know.
Yeah.
And Steele understandingly responds that, you know, we're all actors at one time or another. Some of us just have better roles.
Yeah.
Mildred asks, well, what's next? After all, when Jarvis comes up empty at Miss Holt's, he's sure to come looking for Max at Steele's apartment. Thoughtfully, Steele begins by saying that what Max needs is, and he pauses and then grins as inspiration strikes. What Max needs is a new costume. Well, we're back at Mooney's Carpet and Draperies Emporium, and Mooney isn't impressed. This
I wouldn't be either.
Is my new security system. Yeah, really. Well, Mildred is there with Mooney, and Donahue is there, of course, wearing his security guard's uniform. And Mildred assures Mooney that this is simply a provisional measure until Mr. Steele can install the electronic surveillance and protection hardware. Mooney points out that he's got 19 stores, and, you know, the idea of one man trying to provide security for 19 stores, that doesn't seem to make sense.
No.
But Mildred assures Mooney that the agency will take care of each and every one of those stores, and that Officer Kimball, well, they're going to hire a bunch of people, apparently, and says that Officer Kimball, referring to Donahue, I guess now we're going to call him Kimball. Kimball slash Donahue. Donahue slash Kimball.
Yeah.
Kimball Donahue is there merely to provide uninterrupted service in the interim.
Also, if Mooney's flagship store has been robbed as many times as he says it has, aren't they putting Max in danger?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Just wanted to put that out there. All right.
Is there a question in there somewhere?
No question. Just wanted to clarify.
Well, Mooney still isn't buying it, but Mildred insists that not only is Max Kimball the best in the business, really? The state of security must be pretty pathetic. They're prepared to provide around-the-clock protection, you know, if there's a place for him to stay there in the store. Well, Mooney realizes he's not going to win the debate. He surrenders, saying that, well, yeah, there's a storeroom in the back. And what did they say the man's name was? He looks familiar.
Yeah.
Well, back at the studio, Jennifer is at her desk as Laura bursts into the room, unannounced, uninvited, and without knocking. Typical Laura. We're back to that, I see.
Well, because she was planning on illegally searching it.
Well, yeah.
That's why she's... Yeah.
But still, I mean, you knock to make sure that it's clear.
Right. Sorry. I know. You always check, and you wear your crime clothes. I don't think she's wearing her crime clothes here.
And you usually do it at night. But anyway.
She's not dressed for the occasion.
Anyway, Laura apologizes, saying that she didn't expect to find anyone there.
Basically admitting she was going to illegally search it.
Well, I'm wondering, was there no police tape on the door? I mean,
well, yeah, that too. Is it his office that she's in, or is she in hers?
I think. Well, I guess she's in hers. So okay,
because he was killed in his office. Okay. But still, like if you walk into someone's office and then you say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't think anyone was here," then you're basically admitting that you planned
walked into somebody's office uninvited. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Sorry for breaking into your office, but I was only breaking into your office
because I didn't think you were here. Yeah, exactly.
Well, Laura and Jennifer introduce each other to themselves. No, they introduce themselves to each other. And oh man, this is going to be an editing nightmare, I think. Anyway, when Jennifer asks what she can do for Laura, Laura says that she's a private investigator working on the Stephen Spooner murder. And Jennifer says, well, I thought the police had their man. And Laura says, well, there's some things that just don't add up. When Jennifer asks what those math problems are, Laura skips the question and asks, Jennifer and Spooner were partners, yes? And Jennifer coyly says that she and Stephen were united in every sense of the word.
Gross.
And both women turn their heads at the sound that sounds like breaking wood outside the window. Laura tries to redirect Jennifer's attention away from the sound by saying that after a loss like that, she's surprised that Jennifer wouldn't close down for a while. And Jennifer, not so casually, shrugs it off, saying that rather than suffer depression, she chose to bury herself in her work. I mean, after all, Stephen would have wanted it that way. And she's dedicating the picture to him, of course. Another loud, breaking, crashing sound is heard outside. Laura and Jennifer move toward the window and look out, where they see Steele, having climbed most of the way up the trellis, is hanging onto the ledge of the window.
Badly.
He greets them casually, saying, lovely day, isn't it? As if a man climbing a trellis is an ordinary thing, the sort of thing that no one should even give a second glance to. Well, Steele tries to continue his climb up the trellis, but the cross members keep breaking under his weight. The two women grab his arms and pull, helping him to complete the climb.
Yeah.
Once inside, Laura introduces Steele to Jennifer. Shaking her hand, Steele says, yeah, it's odd. And Jennifer, thinking he's meaning it's odd for a man to be climbing a trellis, concurs. No, that's not what I mean. Steele says it's odd that the trellis couldn't support him, yet supposedly held up fine under Max Donahue, who has Steele by several pounds. Laura muses that is just another thing that doesn't quite add up. Jennifer
It's the only thing so far, because Laura hasn't given her anything that doesn't add up at this point.
Details.
Yeah.
Jennifer challenges Laura, saying that she keeps saying that things don't add up. And what is it that the problem, or what is it that the, boy, my notes, I must have really been on some medication when I wrote these. What is the problem that she has with the idea that Max is guilty, besides obviously the fact that she's working for him? Laura says, well, for starters, why throw the murder weapon with your fingerprints on it through a window and alert witnesses to your presence at the scene? The man panicked, Jennifer suggests. Steele follows up by saying, well, that doesn't explain why he wore his Atomic Man costume to commit a crime. I mean, after all, that's hardly an ideal way to conceal his identity. Laura piles on, asking, why would he show up at the main gate instead of just simply climbing over a wall? Jennifer smugly says, well, those certainly are questions. Do you have any answers to those questions?
That's a good
and
point.
Steele confidently says that, well, they don't, but they know that Max didn't kill Spooner. And Laura adds that now all they have to do is figure out who did. No, Jennifer taunts, you have to do one more thing. And when Steele and Laura ask what that is, Jennifer, hard and cold as anybody, says,
she's ice.
And she dares them, basically saying,
yeah,
you have to prove it. Well, back at the office, Laura and Steele are drowning their sorrows in coffee as Laura insists that she did it. I know she did it. Well, in the script, we have a clarifying portion to the speech where Laura explains who else was in a position to know Max had handled the murder weapon, who else was light enough to climb down the trellis, and who else could have gotten an Atomic Man costume.
This would have been a good line to include.
Yeah. Now, I will provisionally give Laura the first two, but not the third. After all, we know from the scene at the convention that many people have Atomic Man costumes, including Laura.
Her. Yeah. No, but it would have been a good line to include simply for the sake of it changes it makes her look less crazy. Because right now, like up until this point, and we sort of forgive Laura for it because we've seen Steele do this a million times. But up until this point, she's going on a wing and a prayer. She's got no evidence.
Yep.
And this is probably the first logical thing that she could have said. But once they cut it out, it makes her look like she needs a bad guy. And she's like, yeah, it's her. She did it. It's her. Like it.
She's just holding on to her fantasy. Yep.
Yeah. So this, I wish they had kept this in because it would have given Laura a bit more credibility at this point. Because eventually with Steele, whenever he goes off on these tangents, he usually ends up having something to back it up.
Yeah.
So it would have been nice to see her get something as well.
Yeah. Well, it's at this point that the scenes realign and has Mildred asking about motive. After all, Jennifer and Spooner were cozy under the covers as well as business partners. But Laura says it's there. All they have to do is dig it up. Steele points out that Laura's beliefs aside, Jennifer Davenport has an airtight alibi. The cleaning lady puts her in her office at 11 o'clock, precisely the time the studio guards saw the killer climbing down the trellis. Irritated at having the facts pointed out to her, Laura accuses Steele of just being picky, insisting that if there were any holes in the case, they'll just plug them. I mean, after all, reality and facts don't matter as long as we say something is true. That makes it true, and reality had better conform to our opinion of what reality should be.
Welcome to the internet in 2024. Yeah. No, but that would only really work 100% if the guards didn't look at their watches. Because essentially the cleaning lady is the one placing her at a specific time in the office.
Correct.
But if the guards looked at their watches and said, or had looked at their watches and said, no, it was 10, whatever o'clock, then you've got a time discrepancy, right? So
right.
That's probably, I said this was a good plan earlier. She's banking on maybe the fact that they didn't look at the clock.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Steele accuses Laura of going off half-cocked, letting her emotions cloud her judgment, and that they should sit down and look calmly and logically.
He sounds positively depressed saying this.
Yeah.
He doesn't like it.
He realizes that he's beginning to sound like Laura and she's beginning to sound like him.
Yeah.
Laura, pleased at the turnabout, says, yeah, it's a nice change of pace. So while Steele establishes that Jennifer called Max, she'll punch some holes in Jennifer's alibi. Well, as Laura turns to leave the room, Steele turns to Mildred and comments, television, Mildred, deadens the mind, corrupts the soul.
I do like this. I also find it interesting that he's so dead set against TV, being such a film buff. I get it. Sorry, go ahead.
My notes. I say, of course, the same could be said about movies or books or any sort of fiction in any form.
Yeah. I mean, I get that there was some degree of professional rivalry, the big screen versus the small screen, but it feels weird that if he's such a fan of the fictional world and fictional stories being told, that TV would be, I find it odd that he looks down his nose at it when he watches pulp films. Like he's not like he's watching Shakespeare. He's watching noir movies. Yeah, B movies. He loves B movies. So like it's weird that he is taking this particular stance on TV.
Yeah. Well, you know, and the thing is, a lot of those B movies are less quality than things on television.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. You only got 2 hours to tell a story versus a season. You're going to tell a better story.
Well, but even not against TV series. I think I mentioned it before. The Rodgers and Hammerstein. Rodgers and Hammerstein Cinderella with Leslie Ann Warren was a made-for-TV videotape production, and that is a great film. Yeah. So yeah, don't look down on TV, Steele.
It's weird.
Anyway. Next, we see the Fred of the day driving Steele to Mooney's Carpet and Drapery Emporium. And inside, Steele talks to a Venetian blind display looking for Max. Max answers, Kimball here. May I help you? After
like Steele he's hiding. He's a terrible security guard.
Of course. Barney Fife.
Yeah.
After Steele identifies himself, Max opens up the blinds saying, you can't be too careful. Steele asks if Max would recognize the voice that told him to come to the studio that night of the murder. Well, here's a clue, Mr. Steele. He didn't recognize you by voice until you identified yourself. So maybe he isn't all that reliable in that regard. Anyway, Max does admit that he may or may not. He just doesn't know. Steele prompts Max to say, yes, Max, we're desperate. Well, next we see Jennifer Davenport at her desk. She's on the phone asking Mr. Steele, what is it now? Steele makes the excuse that he was just calling to see how she's faring up. Steele pulls the phone away from his ear so Max can hear Jennifer's voice. She gives a snarky answer about how, given that the man she loved was brutally murdered,
sure.
How does he think she feels?
Yeah, right.
Well, Max grabs the phone, covering the mouthpiece, and says, Mozart. When the woman called, there was music playing in the background, just like that. Steele asks about the woman's voice. As Jennifer asks if Steele is still there, Max says, yes, he'll stake his life on it being the same voice. And Steele assures him that, yes, Max, you are staking your life on it. After removing Max's hand from the phone, he assures Miss Davenport that they are closing in on this murderer even as they speak. Steele hangs up, and on the other end, Jennifer also hangs up, but she has a look of concern on her face as she does. Steele dismisses Max back to the rolled ends and remnants. Next, we see Laura confronting Jennifer at the studio office, and it doesn't go well. Jennifer Davenport has an answer for every challenge Laura throws out. Steven Spooner was going to have you replaced as producer of the Atomic Man movie. I'm a great admirer of Roger Foreman. I think he'll add a lot to the production. Your contract with Steven Spooner for the Atomic Man rights carried a survivorship clause, which means that now that he's dead, you own it all. Well, his lawyer insisted on the clause. Max Donahue recognized your voice as the one who called him to the studio that night of the murder. A desperate man will say anything. Under the circumstances, which one of us do you think the police will believe? And Laura explodes. You killed Steven Spooner. And Jennifer says, I was watching Atomic Man with Hazel at the exact moment Maxwell Donahue dispatched my beloved to that great soundstage in the sky.
What?
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of awards for bad acting, come on. That's terrible.
Give this woman a Razzie.
Yeah. Ugh.
Anyway, next we cut to Steele's apartment where he tells Laura, well, she's there. Laura insists that it's only a temporary condition and that there's got to be a way to nail her for Spooner's murder. For Spooner's murder. Ooh.
Yeah, not a great choice of words on Laura's part.
Anyway, Steele points out that so long as Hazel swears that she was watching television with her, they're going to have a tough time proving she's guilty. Laura realizes that that's it. Somehow she changed the time. Steele shakes his head, saying, it won't wash. The station broadcast Atomic Man at 11 o'clock. Suddenly, Laura is positively giddy, and this, I've been waiting for this. She cites Columbo, Peter Falk, Universal Studios, 1975. In an episode entitled Playback, Oscar Werner kills his mother-in-law. He seems to have the perfect alibi until Columbo discovers he used a videotape to alter the apparent time of the murder. But in this case, it isn't that Spooner wasn't killed at 11 o'clock, but that Hazel wasn't with Jennifer at 11 o'clock. She only thought she was because Atomic Man was on. But she was actually watching a tape. Now all they have to do is find that tape. After all, if Columbo could do it, so can they. And this is a very interesting and great reference because, to my recollection, this is the only episode of Remington Steele that I can recall at the moment where we actually see the murder occur and the audience knows who the killer is, and the episode is about watching our detectives figure it out and observing the psychological game between the detectives and the known killer, which is exactly the same episode structure used on Columbo, which I believe was the first TV detective series to use this sort of structure. Up till that time, detective shows were about the whodunit structure, where the audience doesn't know any more about who the murderer was than the detective in the show.
We have had a couple episodes of
we've
Steele.
seen the murders?
Yeah, like Steele eligible for one.
Well, that's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
we've had a couple, but it's not common. Usually we're figuring it out with them.
Yeah, and I think Columbo was the first TV show to actually use that form.
That's interesting.
So it is a nice callback because they're basically doing a Columbo episode here.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's night, and Laura and Steele are in their crime clothes.
Yay, crime clothes.
They climb over a retaining wall to gain access to the studio lot, which, although I haven't checked it, looks rather like the retaining wall they climbed over just outside the mortuary in Dreams of Steele.
It does.
Anyway, down on the ground, Steele, breathing heavily. I mean, why? The wall's just barely over 7 feet tall.
He's always winded from like minor exercise. The man doesn't have an ounce of fat on him, and yet somehow can't do anything. Like he just also. I mean, does the studio not have cameras? They've got a security gate. I would think they'd have cameras.
Yeah, you'd think so, but maybe they figured the wall would do the job for him.
Sure.
But anyway, where was I? Oh, yes. Steele complains that he's learning more about television than he cares to.
Yeah.
They wait for the guard at the gate to turn his back, then hustle across the expanse to Spooner's and now Jennifer's office. No, I guess it's still Jennifer's office, isn't it?
It's still her office, yeah.
Well, yeah. So they pick the lock on the French doors. I did spot a continuity error here. Earlier, when Jennifer unlocked the doors to give her access back in after killing Spooner, the handle was in the horizontal position. Vertical was locked, horizontal was unlocked. But now the handle starts in the horizontal position or unlocked position, and then Steele picks the lock and turns it to the vertical locked position. Minor detail. Anyway, inside the office, Laura heads to the entertainment center as Steele begins pawing through the filing cabinet behind the desk. Laura calls Steele's attention to the video system inside the entertainment center, saying that Jennifer has the means. She then goes to the other side of the cabinet and finds the videotapes of the Atomic Man episodes. And like I said, those don't appear to be beta tapes. They appear too tall. Nope. Anyway, Steele, who has moved to the office door, was pressing an ear against it for indications of trouble. He suggests that they simply take the tape home and watch it. So they grab the tape, exit the office, and a moment later, Hazel enters. Next, Laura is at Maloney's Carpet and Blinds Emporium looking for Max. Not finding him, she stage whispers for him. Then we hear Max call out, I warn you, I'm armed and dangerous.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Barney Fife. Laura identifies herself, after which we see Max come out of hiding at the far end of the stack of carpet rolls. Max rushes over, asks her what she's doing there, and she tells him that they're getting close to clearing him, then attempts to soothe his bruised ego, telling him, Atomic Man triumphs again. Well, Max says no, Atomic Man had very little to do with it, and Laura says no, it was Atomic Man that kept her going on the case. Appreciative of her admiration for the character and of him, he gratefully says that it's fans like her that have kept him going all these years. And Laura begins to tell Max at the show, and by extension, what he meant to her. And she gives a speech here. And
the speech.
Yeah, I'm going to insert the audio of the speech into this here at this point, because I mean it is, like you say, a great speech.
Yeah.
So, and I did it for Steele earlier, so we'll do it again.
Yeah, this is very much a similar situation for her. For sure. Yeah. So cute.
One of the things about TV, and also one of the things about 50s and 60s sitcoms, is that, well, first of all, if you're sitting there watching TV, you're not communicating. You're not having any personal time with the other people. And I can see how a lot of people say that, especially nowadays with everybody sitting around, I'm over here, you're over there, somebody else is over there, and we're just watching, and there's no contact. But what Laura's describing here is not just a bunch of people sitting around watching a show like they would be at a movie theater, for example. I mean, this is a father and a child. The child is in the father's lap, and they're sitting there watching a show that the child loves together. And that is, that's a kind of communication. That's a kind of memory creation there.
Yeah.
Not all memories, not all communication, not all family interactions have to be talking about this, that, or the other thing, or going out and doing things. Sometimes it's just simply being together.
I think it also sort of goes beyond. And it's funny that they would put this speech in here, considering we're now doing a podcast 40 years later about this show, where I'm sure a lot of people have similar stories about how this show brought them closer to a family member or a friend, or helped them create a community. Because, like, for myself, being like a neurodivergent kid who, I had some friends, but not like a ton of people that really liked the same things that I liked. When I got into the show, the internet was at a point where I found the mailing list and I found other people that liked the show. And sure, they were 20, 30 years older than me in some cases, but there was a community that I was able to build with not just this show, but like, all my Buffy references with Buffy and whatnot. Like, there was a community that I managed to build that made me think that I wasn't such a weirdo, or there's that feeling of belonging to something, right? And when you consider what her father meant to her and what his leaving did to her, the fact that they shared this thing together would be even more powerful, because you feel like you belong to something. You're part of a community, and then you're part of a smaller community when you and somebody you love are into the same thing. They would have, it's not just about sitting there for that half hour. They would have talked about it afterwards. They would have, maybe she put a cape around and ran around and he got the joke, or, any stuff like that. My dad used to come with me to the Toronto Trek conventions, because he was the one who got me into Star Trek and got me into science fiction. And so, like, he had autographs too. He used to volunteer the way I did. Like, we shared that connection as well. So yeah, like, this would have been a really powerful thing. And people always dismiss TV, as Steele is doing in this episode, as being superficial or silly, but it's amazing what community and belonging can do for somebody, especially when they need it most. And Laura obviously would have needed it after her dad left. So yeah.
Well, and the other thing is that another one of the criticisms about 50s and 60s family sitcoms in particular was that they were unrealistic. The problems were never too large to overcome, and all problems could be solved in 30 minutes or less, and everybody ended up happy. Which, given Laura's speech here about her father and the make-believe she's engaged in, it's really that sort of thing, in believing in an ideal, because that's what these shows were. It's an ideal. This is, you may not ever achieve this, but this is an ideal to work for. And that is even more important, to have these ideals that we can see and strive when we are in the midst of things that aren't ideal. I mean, they give us comfort. They get us through the tough times. They give us a vision that we can believe in and strive for, even though we may fall short. It gives us hope.
Yeah.
And it's in a weird kind of way. That's exactly what Spooner was talking about earlier. We need heroes. We need hope. And it gives us something to look forward to and work toward. It gives us that vision of what we want, even though we may never get it. And there's an ancient wisdom that teaches that where there is no vision, the people perish.
Yeah.
And that's not just the people in the corporate sense, it's also in the individual sense. And that's what Laura's really talking about here. That show, the time with her father, it all gave her hope that that's been her guiding light all this time.
Did you ever see the movie Pleasantville?
No.
It's a similar sort of thing that in the film, Jake Gyllenhaal's character is obsessed with an old black and white TV show called Pleasantville that was very much similar to the sort of Leave It to Beaver idea of like the perfect family, that they solve all their problems, they love each other. And in his real life, he's kind of a kid who doesn't belong, who his home life isn't great. His sister mocks him for this obsession that he has with this show, because she's sort of more acting out her problems. Like she's instead of losing herself in a show as a coping mechanism, she's kind of going out and sleeping with a lot of guys or whatever. And he's watching this. There's a marathon coming up, and he's obsessed with catching this marathon and watching all of it. And a bolt of lightning hits the TV, and they're basically shoved into the show. And it's a really beautiful story about how he learns to embrace the complexities of the real world, whereas she, on the other hand, who's been dealing with the complexities of the real world for so long, learns to just embrace and love the simplicity of this world that they're suddenly stuck in. And it just, when you said that, that's what it made me think of, because it's all about escapism. It's not a surprise that during the Great Depression, movies became even more popular, especially movies about opulent families and rich,
the rich and the famous
people, the rich and the famous, and these exotic locations, because people didn't want to see movies about people
real
struggling
life.
the way they were struggling. Why would you? You want to see
I can go outside and see it. I can go inside the house and see it.
You want to see a musical where everybody's dancing around and has beautiful costumes on, and they look gorgeous, and they're living these glamorous lives because that's a way to escape. So Laura, this makes perfect sense. It's escapism, it's hope, it's all of the things she valued that she thought maybe her dad valued too. And yeah.
Well, and the interesting thing is that every time she brings up her dad and talks about him, she does acknowledge that, yes, he left and it hurt, but she's always coming back to the positive, the joyful things, the circus, going to the circus, sitting and watching this TV show. She always manages to bring it back to the good times with her dad. She doesn't dismiss the pain and the hurt of him leaving, but she doesn't let that override her and make her block out the good times.
Yeah.
And so this show is one of those things that she's using as a way to relive those good times. So, yeah. And as a final note, J.J. Abrams would love this scene because of a lens flare. And quite frankly, I'm really surprised that somebody didn't order a reshoot, because in 1985, that was considered bad form.
Yeah, it wasn't a technique that you used.
No. Yeah. So anyway, as Laura finishes her speech, there's a noise. And given that no one else is supposed to be there, it's probably not the kind of thing you want to ignore. So they move to investigate, and they see the roll-up door of the dock being raised and 3 men slipping into the store beneath it. Max turns to leave, but Laura stops him, asks him, where's he going? Max says he's got to call the police. And, well, it's a noble gesture and certainly the actions of an honest and moral man, but Laura reminds him that technically he's a fugitive, and she directs him to lie low.
They're supposed to be protecting their clients' assets too, so
yeah,
saying.
But ethics, aiding and abetting, yeah. Anyway, the men make their way into the main area of the store, splitting up as they go. And suddenly we see several tall rolls of carpet being shoved down onto one of the men. And then we see that Laura has pushed them over onto him. She then rushes off in another direction, then slowly makes her way between the high warehouse-style shelves laden with more carpets. But one of the other men suddenly appears at one end of the row, and he slowly stalks toward her, a crowbar in one hand, menacingly slapping it into the palm of his other. She turns around to escape, but then is faced with the third man blocking her exit from the rows in the other direction. And just when it seems she's trapped, Max calls out for her to duck. And we see Max on a forklift, a large roll of carpet on the forks, headed straight for the trio. Laura ducks, and Max pins the two men against the shelves with the forklift and the rolls of carpet. Except, she was trapped between two very long, very tall, and very parallel shelving units full of rolls of carpet, which were side by side. And the two baddies were at either end of the aisle between, and they were all between those shelves. There's no way Max could have done that with the forklift.
Yep, super confused.
Yeah, so not so much. But anyway, it happens that way. Things mysteriously move on their own in the night. I know this because I used to have to walk through a truck yard at night. And I know that those trucks were just sitting there waiting to come alive and get me. Anyway, after Max has trapped the baddies, and it looks like you're frozen.
Oh, no.
Oh, no, you're there. You're just
I'm
zoned out.
Listening. I was wrapped.
I'm so boring. You're zoned out. Anyway, after Max has trapped the baddies, Laura, still on the floor after having dived out of the way, looks up at Max and with a worshipful tone calls to Max, my hero. And Max smiles. Next, we see uniformed officers handcuffing the baddies. And then we see Mooney compliment Max, a.k.a. Kimball, on his first-rate works. And then we hear somebody slow clapping.
So I'm curious as to why Jarvis is there. He's a homicide cop. Did he know? Was he following them? Like, was he... Because unless he knew that Laura and Steele were connected to Mooney's carpets, there'd be no reason for him to show up.
I'm guessing that Laura called it in. And where Laura is, Jarvis wants to be.
Fair enough.
So anyway, Jarvis congratulates them and tells them that they're both under arrest.
Yeah.
Next, at the police station, a female officer brings Laura to the office where Jarvis and Steele are waiting. Jarvis informs Laura that Steele has posted her bail and then instructs the policewoman to bring in Laura's personal effects. Steele, overplaying his part as the head of the agency, informs Laura that he is absolutely astounded by her behavior and that he's going to have to seriously reconsider her position in the agency. I mean, after all, he concludes with a devious grin on his face, he has a reputation to maintain.
Enjoying this way too much.
And as he's saying this, Laura is giving him a look that says, excuse me? Yeah, just who do you think you are and who do you think you're talking to?
Yep.
Well, Laura decides to turn her irritation on Jarvis, telling him firmly that he has the wrong man. Without looking at Laura, Jarvis flatly tells her that that isn't what the evidence says. Laura slams her fist on the desk and tells Jarvis that she knows that Max was framed by Jennifer Davenport and she's going to prove it. Sarcastically, he responds, asking, is she going to bully a confession out of her? Because if she is, he doesn't know if there's enough room on the sheet for harassment, or although he uses the British pronunciation.
Harassment, yeah.
Yes.
I noticed that too.
I found interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, Steele leans over and in a flippant, let's get through this as quickly as possible, manager. The one that he employs when he's trying to make a quick escape from a situation. He assures Jarvis that Miss Holt will not break any laws from now on. And a good doctor, proper drugs, a little shock therapy. Yeah, she'll be as good as new. And that's a promise.
Shock therapy?
Didn't that come up once before? I think that came up once before.
Yeah.
Anyway, the policewoman returns with the envelope of Laura's personal effects, which Jarvis takes from her, dumps on his desk, and then tells Laura to check them out and sign for them. Oh, but what's this? He asks, pointing to the videotape that was amongst her possessions. Laura awkwardly says that, well, it's just something she bought from the Atomic Man convention. Yeah, that's the story. Jarvis picks it up and looks at it. And then pointing to the label on the front tells her that, she really ought to have to take the studio property sticker off next time.
Yeah.
Kind of makes it look stolen. And he suddenly realizes what he's saying and then disapprovingly asks, we are not looking at a breaking and entering charge here, are we, Miss Holt? And when Laura doesn't answer, he says, well, he thinks he better hang on to it. just to make sure Miss Davenport's collection is complete. He drops the tape in his desk drawer, and Laura gestures a sign of resignation and momentary defeat. After a moment, Steele asks if they could see Max. And in a scene that, to me, is reminiscent of a scene from season 1, Steele Belted, Steele assures Max that things couldn't look better.
Yeah, right.
And Max suggests that Steele ought to see them from his side.
Yeah.
Well, Laura tells Max that they know who killed Spooner. Max unenthusiastically says, "Yay, that's great." Laura says that with Max's help, they're going to prove it. Unconvinced, Max asks how that's going to happen, to which Steele says, "By giving the performance of your life, mate."
I mean, put that challenge in front of an actor. Right? Like, he's going to do it.
You got any scenery around here I can chew on? Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes. Well, we are back in Jarvis's office. Max is in a chair in front of the desk, and there is a woman present to transcribe Max's confession. Jarvis tells Max that since it's his confession, he should start wherever he would like. So Max does. It all began at a 5,000-watt radio station. And Jarvis cuts him off saying that he meant the night of the murder. Start anywhere he would like on the night of the murder. So Max begins again, starting at the point that the guards threw him off the lot, saying that he doubled back and jumped the fence. He laughs as he says he landed in a clump of hydrangea. Jarvis doesn't laugh.
No.
Max continues weaving a more and more fantastic story. As he progresses, he gets up and begins to act out the story.
Why isn't he in cuffs? He's a murder suspect.
It's TV.
Okay. Fair enough.
Besides, he's not a violent criminal.
Yeah, he just bludgeoned a man to death.
Yeah.
Other than that.
Anyway, as he's acting out the story, he moves behind the desk next to Jarvis as he says, "I slipped into the production building. I crept down the hall." And crouching, he begins to move toward the door of Jarvis's office. And he continues, "One step at a time, planning, plotting, knowing what I had to do, knowing what I'd been driven to do. I arrived at Stephen Spooner's office. Reaching for the door, he dramatically throws it open. And I flung open the door, and he rushes through it into the outer office. Jarvis, spellbound, tells the woman transcribing Max's confession, excitedly tells her to get up and make sure she gets all this. He picks up the transcription machine, carrying it into the other room with the woman continuing to type as she's following. Spotting an officer sitting at a desk across the room, Max angrily points at him, begins warily approaching him, and declares, "There sat Stephen Spooner, the man who told me I was too old to be a superhero." More and more people from the office gather, spellbound by Max's performance. And as we see, slinking behind in the window outside of Jarvis's office is Steele. Back inside, Max intently says, "Then I saw it." Breaking character, he points at the officer's nightstick and asks, "May I?" Max picks up the nightstick, holds it out to admire it, then pulls it to his chest, cherishing it. "My atomic scepter." He stretches his arm out, again holding the nightstick in front of him. He pauses, gives the nightstick a curious look, and then, with a somewhat confused tone, says, "Actually, this looks more like my proton wand." Anyway, and we see Steele and Laura still in the background, still outside the window, trying to open the window while simultaneously watching the proceedings. Holding the nightstick in a striking position and creeping toward a nearby vacant chair, he says, "I took the scepter in my hand, and it felt good. I crept up on Spooner, and I hit him." And Max begins beating the chair as if trying to reduce it to its elemental components. In the meantime, we see that Steele has entered Jarvis's office through the window, with Laura hanging back in the window. Laura urges Steele to hurry up because Max is going into his big finish.
Yes,
Max turns around to check.
Climbed in sooner than that, but okay.
Oh, he had a tough time picking the lock on the window.
Yeah.
Anyway, Max turns around to check Laura and Steele's progress, and seeing them still in the office, realizes he has to stretch the scene out. So he disappointedly tells Jarvis, "But I missed." Jarvis is confused. Max continues. This made Spooner angry. He glances back again, and Laura and Steele are still gesturing for him to stretch the scene. Turning back to the chair, he tosses the nightstick aside, drops to his knees, and grabs the back of the chair. We fought! He glances back again, and Laura and Steele are still not finished. I struggled, and he struggled. As Jarvis seems to be getting suspicious, Max flails, throwing himself around, grabbing his throat, acting out both halves of the struggle to the death. He then again looks toward the office. This time, Steele holds up the videotape and gives Max a thumbs up and a cut sign. Max finishes with a flourish, shouting, "And I choked him!" Jarvis, who has gotten back into the action, is mimicking the choking action and pumping his fist in the air and shouts, "Yes!" Then confused, but coming to his senses, says, no, he died from a blow to the head. Max stops his pantomime of choking Spooner and looks up at Jarvis and calmly says, well, then obviously I'm not the murderer. Dismayed, Jarvis demands to know what Max is talking about. Well, Max shakes his head and admonishes Jarvis. Well, I say I choked him, and you say I hit him. One of us better get our story straight. And the crowd of officers gathered let out a collective groan of disappointment and then turn away.
That's funny. That whole scene is really well done. It's very funny.
Talk about actors chewing up the scenery. He sure did. Anyway, back at Remington's apartment, Steele is stretched out on the couch, laughing, and Laura loads the videotape into the player. He declares Max's performance of the evening nothing short of brilliant. As Laura sits down beside Steele, she suggests that perhaps television isn't the vast wasteland he thinks it is. Steele thoughtfully acknowledges that, well, perhaps he has misjudged the medium. On the television, we see the fight scene between Atomic Man and the villain that we saw earlier in Jennifer's office that she and Hazel were watching. But upon viewing the scene, Steele begins to reconsider his preceding comment. He begins cautioning Laura that her presumption of Jennifer's guilt may be wrong, saying, I don't want to dampen your spirits, Lieutenant Colombo, but the fact that Jennifer has a tape of Atomic Man doesn't prove that she played it that night of the murder.
I was thinking that obviously we see how she's able to nail Jennifer later, but the whole time that she's hanging her case on this tape, I'm thinking to myself, okay, just because you have the tape.
Well, as somebody who's going to be theoretically producing the movie,
she would have it.
Yeah, she would have seen the whole series, presumably, or at least if she hadn't watched them, she would have at least had them.
Yeah, she'd have material there to draw from. So,
And then there's another interesting point that I didn't put in my notes, but that I just thought of that ties into that. And I'll try and remember to bring it up later. Anyway, Laura doesn't appreciate Steele's pessimism, telling him that let's take it one thing at a time. And then she says, what's gotten into you anyway? You used to have such flair, such style, always ready to take a chance, play a hunch. Steele, frowning slightly and parroting Laura's long-held attitude toward his own flights of fancy, says that one of them has got to keep their feet on the ground. Annoyed, Laura accuses him of enjoying the role reversal and of punching holes in her theory, and, of course, threatening her with shock therapy. Steele, totally failing to read the room, leans toward her and deviously tells her that he's merely trying to keep her from going off the deep end, and suggestively concludes that perhaps he might join her in going off the deep end if she'd like company.
Yeah.
And seemingly anticipating a kiss, Laura puts the kibosh on that, telling him currently to just shut up and watch the video. And as we saw earlier, Atomic Man, with a burst of atomic power, gives the mad scientist a double karate chop on the shoulders. The dastardly brute reels backwards onto the large computer cabinet, Atomic Man gripping his shoulders all the while. And while the two men struggle, they then collapse on the floor, and we see that the lab is aflame as the Atomic Man hurls the rapscallion across the room and onto his back onto the floor. And again, we see the scoundrel pull out his blasting gun and point it at Atomic Man, who is now standing behind the counter in the lab, declaring, go ahead, shoot. The power of the atom is only realized when it is split. Well, we have a time jump, and it's the next morning. Steele is asleep on the couch, and Laura is sitting on the floor, continuing to watch the video for the umpteenth time.
You gotta wonder how many times she's seen this. Wow.
It's a half-hour episode, probably 24 minutes running time. And she's been sitting there all night. Yeah, that's a lot of times to sit there and watch
eyes would be bleeding at this point. Like, no, thank you. I mean, even if I loved it, to watch it that many times, you'd be sick of it.
Yeah. Anyway, next, the front door buzzers. The front door buzzer sounds, causing them both to jerk in surprise. Steele sits up, realizing that the same video is still playing, groans, and in a day's notes that it's still the same. I keep hoping I'll wake up and I'll be watching Gone with the Wind or even Heaven's Gate. Laura, stretching painfully as she gets up, goes to answer the door. It's Mildred. She apologizes, saying that it took her a while to find anybody working at the station this early. She pulls a videotape from her purse and hands it to Laura, saying, "Here's the broadcast tape from the Atomic Man show." Laura and Mildred move to the center of the room. Mildred halts, looking at Steele as he groans, stands and leaves the room, saying that he's going to have to take a shower, as Laura ejects the previous tape and inserts the new tape into the machine. Laura and Mildred sit on the couch. Mildred stares at Laura, who is staring open-mouthed as she watches the video. She leans forward, focusing intently on the action on the television screen, and Mildred mirrors her action. Then Laura leans back, and again, Mildred mirrors. Next, we see the action on the screen. Again, Atomic Man and the villain are battling. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and throw it in here.
Okay.
Jennifer has nothing to do with the television station, as far as we know. She has no relationship, business, personal, or otherwise. How did she know which episode they were going to show? Did she have it in the TV guide?
I'm assuming so. I'm guessing that she looked it up ahead of time. But then that would presuppose that she has all of the episodes on tape, because that you couldn't be certain. That
would be, you kind of think if she's going to produce the movie, then she probably has all the episodes on tape.
Yeah.
But the TV guide, although usually right, wasn't always right. And sometimes TV stations, especially those local stations that relied primarily on syndicated television shows, as we're talking about here, sometimes they would switch it at the last minute, either because the film wasn't available or some other reason, or, they just make a change to the schedule. I know that happened a lot.
She's taking a chance here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it seems a little bit iffy.
She's also taken a chance that the guards wouldn't have checked their watches, right? Like,
again with the watches.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like,
You're just saying, I know. Yeah.
It's not as perfect as it looks at first glance, because like you said, if they preempted, broadcasts get preempted all the time if there's a major news story, right? Like I when I was watching Saturday Night Live back in 1997, it got preempted for Diana's death, right? So, and especially you're going to preempt something that's a syndicated show, because you're not essentially interrupting anything new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there were times that things were submitted to TV Guide, and this show always shows at 11 o'clock at night, Monday through Friday. And then even after it's been sent to the TV Guide, which, they've got to get their deadlines in. It's got to be months in advance.
Yeah.
In that intervening interval, the studio makes a change and says, you know what? We're not going to show that show at 11 o'clock anymore. We're going to show something else. So that show's over with. We're done with it.
Could be too. So, although if there's a movie coming, my guess is they'd want to keep it running. But yeah.
Yeah. You never know. Anyway, Mildred leans over to Laura and asks, "What are we looking for?" And Laura gives the classic clueless detective answer, "I'll let you know when we find it." Mildred responds in a sort of sympathetic tone that one might use when trying to reassure someone who is showing symptoms of mental confusion,
insanity.
Saying, "That's fair." And the music from the television climbs to a moderate crescendo and then is cut off. Laura, eyes wide, springs to her feet and declares, "Aha!" Mildred wants to know, "Aha what?" Laura gives out a sinister chuckle, then tells Mildred to throw a towel on Mr. Steele. They're going to make mincemeat out of a murderess. Well, at Jennifer's office, Laura, videotape in hand, is telling Jennifer that she almost got away with it. She had everything figured out, everything that is, except this tape. Addressing Jarvis, Jennifer snidely says that she hopes this dreadfully boring woman has a point. Well, Jarvis isn't happy. He rudely tells Jennifer that, look, I gave up a racquetball game to be here, so the least we can do is hear her out before I arrest her for stealing police property.
I do appreciate that Jarvis is willing to at least hear her out.
Although technically it's not police property. It's evidence. Yes.
It's police
not
evidence.
Police property. So get it right, Jarvis. Cases get thrown out on minor technicalities. But anyway, Laura also takes exception to his terminology, stating that she merely borrowed it. I'm not sure that's legal offense, but anyway.
I mean, sure.
Yeah. Moving to the entertainment center and inserting the tape into the player, she continues with her summation. Steven Spooner had dumped Jennifer. She knew eliminating him could save her career. Having seen Max at the press conference, she knew that he'd be the perfect scapegoat. She proceeded with what should have been the perfect crime, using the prop that she knew Max had handled, then throwing it out the window to attract attention. When the guards saw her in the borrowed costume, they naturally assumed that she was Max. Indignantly, Jennifer demands to know, how many ways does she has to say it? She was right here in this office watching TV with Hazel.
Yep. This is where she gets almost the Grinch grin on her face, right? Like she's like, I was waiting for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's positively gloating when she says, yes, the perfect alibi. And it was perfect. Almost. Steele, sensing that she's losing the interest of the audience, chides her to cut to the chase.
That's rich coming from him. Like the guy who loves a good, and it was so-and-so. Yeah.
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 Well, Laura continues, saying it was easy to figure out that Jennifer had set the clock on her in her office ahead, and playing the tape of Atomic Man for Hazel, that was brilliant. Laura steps over to the door, opens it, and calls in Hazel. Jennifer seems to be getting a little less cocky. Hazel comes in. Laura steps back to the VCR, pushes the button on the front, and steps over to Jennifer's desk, picking up the remote, commenting, handy gadgets, these remote controls. She pushes the play button. The fight scene that we have seen now several times replays yet again. As the scene plays, Laura instructs everyone to watch very carefully. Be very, very careful. As Atomic Man tells the bad guy to shoot, Laura asks Hazel, do you remember seeing this scene? Hazel says yes, she does. Laura asks Jennifer to confirm. And with a very strong undertone of annoyance, Jennifer reaffirms that of course she does. She was right there with Hazel. Jarvis, aggravated at missing his handball session, demands to know if this is all leading somewhere. As Laura steps back over the entertainment center, Steele chides Jarvis. Really, Detective, forgetting Miss Holt's criminal tendencies, she still is a brilliant investigator. Brilliant. And then he leans over to Laura and with some concern in his voice asks if this is all leading somewhere. Well, rented lips. Laura removes the first tape and then inserts the second. The fight scene begins yet again and progresses as it has so many times before, but instead of Atomic Man telling the bad guy to shoot, the scene ends abruptly as Atomic Man and the villain crash to the floor behind the workbench, followed by a screen with a placard shot that reads, "Insert commercial here." Laura tells the others that's how the show aired that night. Jennifer stands, insisting that that's impossible. No, Miss Davenport, Laura informs her, that's syndication.
Yep.
When a program is broadcast for a local station, its length is carelessly, randomly, and viciously edited to allow for more commercials. Oh, I'm sorry.
I think you're editorializing here.
The scene you both claim you saw was unceremoniously cut in the middle.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I added that, but I'm not wrong.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting that this was pointed out back then, because you'd think that they wouldn't want to admit that every time you syndicate, you end up cutting from the original broadcast. You're never going to see the full episode as it aired unless you're watching it, well, now on DVD. But back then, there was no way of doing that. So unless you saw it the first night it aired, you were always going to be missing something. And
well, even with the DVDs.
Well, yeah,
we're missing music.
Yeah.
We're missing other things.
The what was interesting, because they were a slave to the time slot, right? And just a sorry about this, but another Buffy reference. There was a musical episode that aired in season 6 called Once More with Feeling. And it was a weird case because the episode was actually 8 minutes longer than the normal 45-minute broadcast time. And Joss Whedon basically had to beg, borrow, steal, and plead for the network to allow him to air it as such, because that would be cutting into the time of another show. Right. So basically a big deal was made upon the fact that this was the only time you were going to see the full episode. So if you wanted to see the episode, you better watch that night and you better watch it this time. And, because not only would it be syndicated later on, well, actually already was in syndication because it was past season 5, but it would be even more heavily cut than normal because 8 minutes would be missing plus whatever else they cut from it. So I missed a dentist appointment that night. My mother was not pleased, but I was not going to risk my VCR screwing up or something going wrong, because I had programmed it, of course, but just in case, I was going to be there. And then, of course, the DVDs now you can, whatever, it's fine. But
Well, and syndication, they were vicious about cutting things, and they did not use a lot of care and concern about what they cut and where they cut it. And it made for some very, very awkward episodes.
Very frustrating. Yeah, I agree.
So anyway, after Laura has trapped Jennifer, she sneers at Laura and contemptuously tries to insult her. You and your atomic man. And
ooh, careful. That's a nasty one.
At this point, I have a note that says, is this really the sort of person you want handling the reboots of your favorite TV shows, people?
Right? That's pretty bad dialogue.
And so, anyway, Steele laughs at the absurdity of a killer caught by a lousy television show and a rotten commercial. He tells Laura that there's something poetic about that, although for the life of him, he can't think what.
I do like that.
Back in Steele's office, Max is trying to express his gratitude for the fact that they, although technically it was mostly Laura, never lost faith in him. Yeah. Steele grins, saying, well, after all, you are the atomic man, eh? Max somewhat regretfully says, no, not anymore. Mildred sympathizes with Max about the movie project being killed, but Max excitedly tells her, oh, don't feel sorry for him. His agent called and has gotten Max the title role of a new series, Laserman. Mildred slaps him on the back. Steele stands up, clapping his hands. He moves around the desk and holds out his hand to give Max a congratulatory handshake, saying that since he's known Max, he's developed a deeper satisfaction and gratification for the small screen. Max, cocking his head and giving Steele a critical look, suggests that, Steele, you're not such a bad-looking guy. Have you ever considered an acting career? And Laura bursts out laughing, Steele giving her a look of dismay as we freeze.
I have to say, I haven't commented on her fashion in this episode, but she looks amazing in that purple sweater. That's a really good color for her, I think.
I'm not so necessarily so sure about the color, but sweaters, yeah. Give me sweaters.
Yeah, I know you're a fan of sweaters, but I'm specifically, I think the purple looks really good. I find that she wears a lot of brown in the show, and it's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with wearing, your business clothing and whatnot, and the suits, etc. But I find that when she wears a bold color that's not a pastel, it really kind of brings out her skin tone, and it looks nice on her. Anyway, that's my final thought.
Okay. Anything else?
I really like this episode. Just in general, I think it's I like an episode where we get a lot of character stuff for Laura, and it does a good job of it. It's one of the few. One of my main criticisms this season so far has been that the freeze has not really allowed them to do much. Really, that it almost shows that they were relying too heavily on their relationship banter, and once they've got the freeze in effect, a lot of these episodes have been Steele and Laura doing things separately, and not really a lot of interaction going on between them that's any fun. And there's some fun in this. Like this is fun again. So I like that it's a character episode for Laura. I like that we've got some stuff about her dad. I like that it's fun. I like that it sort of pokes fun at TV and it's kind of self-mocking almost. It's a good time. I enjoy it.
Yeah. Ditto. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, my final thoughts.
It's a fun episode. It really is. All right. And with that, we wrap it up by reminding you about the website, www. I guess I don't really have to say that anymore, do I? SteeleWatching.com. We'll have show notes, Amazon links for hopefully the Fugitive TV series, if I can find a collection that's available. Gone with the Wind, Heaven's Gate, and links to
Columbo,
resources.
don't forget Columbo.
Oh, yes, Columbo. That one ran a long time. I don't know if they've got a full series set or not. And it's going to be expensive if it is. But yeah, if they have one, I'll include that. Yeah. So, and then we'll have links to other resources such as
the Facebook page, the Instagram, the Twitter, or X as they're now calling it, as well as
X, the unknown.
Yeah, right. And of course, the officially unofficial Steele Watchers Facebook group, which we are a member of, and where people go to discuss all things Remington Steele. So come join us, have fun.
And two things. First of all, if you're not a Facebook user and have no interest in being so, and there are people out there that people out there of that attitude, you can always contact the show through the website. We have an email, and you can find it there in the show notes. So you just drop us a line. And if you want to be like our supporters and make a one-time donation or a subscription donation, you'll find the links to do that on the website as well. So next, have I got a Steele for you?
AKA the end of the freeze. Or the beginning of a thaw. Steele thawing out. Sorry.
Okay, well, hey, thanks everybody. We had fun, great episode, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey everybody, Eric and Sara here. Just a quick announcement to let you know that yes, we do appreciate everyone who listens, participates, and supports the podcast in whatever way you do. But we wanted to give an extra thank you to those who are so graciously giving to be monthly financial supporters.
We are making live streams of our recording sessions available to anyone who is a monthly financial supporter. So not only can you watch us live as we record our podcast episodes, you will be getting access to the raw, behind-the-scenes, unedited version of episodes before they get officially released.
And Sara, does that include our mistakes and screw-ups and our humiliating?
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
every
it does.
Single one of them.
Every single one of them, yes. So again, this is just an extra thank you to those who are going above and beyond. But whether you choose to become a monthly financial supporter or not, we still love you. We want to say we thank you for your support, your encouragement, and your feedback.
If you want to become a monthly financial supporter, please visit our website at www.steelewatching.com to sign up.